if it impedes my hearing.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of council to order. Our clerk will be Ms. Sheila Guri. And I would ask we're going to add a late item, which is the Community Charter, Section 91, Sub I, the receipt of advice that is subject to listener-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Correct, Ms. Guri? And I'd ask for procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved by Councillor Bonner, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the November 2nd regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192 governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding mass gathering events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the provincial health orders in effect. And the first item on the agenda, of course, is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, and we have a few.
Yes, thank you, Worship. For agenda item 15B, Councillor Armstrong motion regarding residential street parking. We're adding a delegation from Susan Barr. For agenda item 8B, Inspector Lisa Fletcher, Acting Superintendent, Nanaimo RCMP, we're adding the PowerPoint presentation titled Nanaimo RCMP Detachment Third Quarter Update. And we're removing agenda item 12A, 90 and 94 Victoria Road, Maintenance of Property Bylaw Appeal. The appellant is unable to attend this evening, so we're postponing it to the 16th to have him possibly attend via Zoom as he lives out of town.
Thank you very much. A motion for approval of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favour? Any contrary? Motion carries. Motion for the adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favour? Motion carries. Thank you very much. On to the Mayor's report. I'm going to start on what is not a natural but somewhat difficult topic. And I'm sad that I have to talk about it, but candidly, there are still reports of abuse drifting up to my office with people behaving in an uncivil manner in their interactions with the city staff, particularly at our recreational facilities. I appreciate that parents in particular are very anxious to see their children engaged in healthy athletic activities. But we are still in the midst of a declared state of provincial emergency. And our staff, as I have indicated, sometimes on an almost daily basis, have to respond to directions and from the provincial health officer and organizations to which they look for guidance in terms of how things are conducted at our public facilities. And so I would simply ask that everyone try and be a little kinder and a little more reserved and a little more patient. You know, we're all in a hurry sometimes, and we all think it's the most important thing in the world, but we do have to step back and respect one another. The people who work for the City of Nanaimo don't get hired to tolerate bad behavior. It's the kind of behavior that is completely inappropriate, particularly coming from adults in our community. So I'm hopeful that people will be conscious of that as they deal with decisions that are made by staff who have to respond to directions they receive, and all in the interests of public health and safety. I'd also like to remind everyone that the United Nations has called for an international campaign for 16 days of activism against gender-based violence from November 25th, 2020, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, to December 10th, 2020, Human Rights Day. And the city has so proclaimed, and I would ask everyone to consider that as they're thinking about the happy holiday season, to also think about the fact that violence against women in our society and around the world is a horrible problem. And as we see liberal democracies diminishing in number year after year in the last few years, Human Rights Day becomes even more important. We're also in the midst of the Poppy campaign. If there's ever a time for us to reflect on history and sacrifices made by previous generations, it is during the annual Poppy campaign. Every year from the last Friday in October to November 11th, tens of millions of Canadians wear a poppy as a visual pledge to honour Canada's veterans, remember all those who sacrificed for the freedoms we enjoy today. I will try and resist my normal tendency to wax on longer than I should, but this leads me to a request that is a difficult thing for many to observe, I'm sure. This community has gathered in, I would suggest, increasing numbers year after year to attend the Remembrance Day ceremonies downtown. I think there is a growing recognition as the last of the veterans of the Second World War pass, that this striking period in the history of humanity is of more concern perhaps now than it's been. Many will argue that we're less at war and more of us die from other means. But as we see dictatorships arise around the world, and remember that it wasn't a war against Germany or Japan per se, it was a fight against fascism and dictatorial regimes. And Remembrance Day takes us back to one of this community's distinguished veterans, who, as many of you know, as having attended the ceremony, will celebrate his 102nd birthday on November the 11th, and that's Vic Osborne, a person I always like to recognize, a veteran of the war in the Far East, and who saw some very difficult times in defense of freedom and democracy. However, what that means for all of us this year is that the traditional ceremony, where we have crowded shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm on occasion, to celebrate Remembrance Day, to remember the sacrifices that have been made by so many, will simply not be able to do that. Indeed, the rules may be changing as I speak in terms of how things will be conducted. It will be on a very small scale. Our senior member of council, in terms of service as a member of council, Councillor Thorpe, will be MC this year, but we are asking, and the Legions who are organizing this event are asking, that everyone stay home, please, and watch the ceremony, which will be televised on Shaw Cable from 10:45 until 11:30. There will be a number of invited guests to lay wreaths, and obviously I will be honored on behalf of the City of Nanaimo to do so. But for other folks, unless you receive a specific invitation, please, out of respect for the health of those who will be participating in the ceremony and the health of the community, celebrate Remembrance Day by going about your business, but stopping at the 11th hour, and with your silence. But otherwise, please stay home and celebrate that silence in the sanctity and safety of your own home. This is not an easy year. I know that for many, Thanksgiving obviously wasn't what we expect it to be. But I remind everyone that compared to the challenges of the generation that fought the First World War and the Second World War, Canadians who served in the Korean War, who have engaged in peacekeeping around the world, and all of those, what we are being asked to do is a very, very small sacrifice. So in the interest of public safety, I'm asking that all of you, again, watch it on TV, but please resist the temptation to come out and be part of what has normally been your activity on Remembrance Day, which is to lock arms, to march, to participate, and to remember. So thank you very much. Ms. Gurry, in terms of rising and reporting, we have no items. I am now delighted, honored, we are privileged to welcome Donna Hayes, Board Chair of the Nanaimo Port Authority, distinguished business leader, who is going to present, after many months of the hard work of the Mayor's Task Force, consisting of, and a number of them are here, some are coming in, I believe, via the electronic wave, and I'm just going to mention them by name if I will, and we'll start with Dr. Deb Saucier, who's unable to be here in person, but is joining us electronically, the President of Anchor University. Ian Simpson, Distinguished CEO of Petroglyph Enterprises, Nanaimo First Nation. James Byrne, Managing Partner, MNP in the back room. Signe Madden, Executive Director of United Way. Councillor Brown, of course, and myself, but as I say, Donna Hayes, who is going to present the report on behalf of everyone. Very excited, and I will probably say a little more at the conclusion of this, but thank you for everything. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, Council, thank you very much for having us today. On behalf of the Mayor's Task Force, I would like to start by acknowledging we are on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations, and we'd like to sincerely thank them for their graciousness as hosts. As I get started today, am I in control of the clicker? Is that what we said? I want to point out the name of our report, and the Mayor has kindly stolen a bit of my thunder, so I won't be introducing the team as you've all met them. But we'd ask you to start by noticing the name of our report. We changed it several times, but building a healthy and connected community is a theme or a strand you're going to see through our entire presentation tonight. It's become really the backbone of our statement for our recommendations going forward. The side, I'm going to the side, okay. And there we are. Before we get into what our purpose is, what our purpose given to us was as the task force, I just want to draw your quick attention in the report to what the city's strategic vision is. It's to be a community that is livable, environmentally sustainable, and full of opportunity for all generations and walks of life. I want you to think about that as we go through the proposal tonight and what the recommendations are. That's a critical piece that was at the back of our minds as we were putting together our proposals and as we were talking about what our purpose was. So imagine, if you will, the kind mayor of your municipality calls you and says, would you volunteer your time on a task force around a pandemic, a situation that none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes, that our parents have never seen, that those of us who own small businesses or involved in community organizations have never seen, that we're in the middle of struggling with, like everyone else in the world is struggling with, and you get a call asking if you'll volunteer and put some time into this task force. I thought about it for a moment, as I'm sure my other task force members did, and then I thought, I know Mayor Krogh fairly well, and I know if I was calling on behalf of the port to ask for some of his time, he would show up and put his time in, and I should do the same for him. And so thank you in advance for including me. But he gave us the purpose at that time that you as a council formed for our group going forward. And I just want to read through it because I want the general public to know what it says. It's to provide strategic recommendations to council which will inform the forthcoming 5-year fiscal plan. It will align the current adopted strategic plan. Number 2, it will work in collaboration with public bodies, private institutions, and community organizations to build local resilience. Number 3, it will work in collaboration with the business community and other community organizations to identify immediate economic recovery strategies for residents, businesses, and community organizations. Number 4, to develop a plan for the coordination and implementation of recovery and relief efforts to support the community through the COVID-19 pandemic and its recovery process. And finally, number 5, to identify and support community-driven ideas and solutions to assist in the recovery process, including the design and implementation of activities and programs. I don't know about you, but that's pretty broad. That's a pretty big mandate that says speak to every single person in the community who wants to talk to you, coordinate with every level of government that is actively implementing programs, and then align it with the strategic and the fiscal plan for the city of Nanaimo and come forward with some processes that are going to help individual businesses and community organizations. It's pretty broad. I can tell you by meeting 2, I was sitting in my seat wondering, what had I signed up for? And I'm not really certain that we can get to the outcomes we need to get to. I can say as a member of the task force, and that's all I am, I'm just the lucky person tonight who got chosen to give the presentation. I was overwhelmed by meeting 2, thinking how can we possibly come up with recommendations? There should be 150 recommendations coming out of this committee. But real life is, if we were to give you that many recommendations, nothing would actually materialize or be realized as a community moving forward. So we've been able to pare down those recommendations, and tonight, as you hear us talk about them, and before we move on to what the process was, I want to bring forward a couple of ideas. A couple of elements rang very true for us through the process, and one was that there was no room for conversation at the table for the word I or me. All of the conversation was about us and us as a community. So I took a couple minutes this afternoon. I thought, well, I'm wondering what people define community as. Everybody has a different definition. And in 2001, the American Journal of Public Health said, community is this. It's a group of people with diverse characteristics who are linked by social ties, shared common perspectives, and engage in joint actions in geographical locations or settings. And so one of the issues the task force had to deal with is we couldn't look at it as a specific person. Everything had to be through the lens of who we are as a community and how we can affect a community moving forward and what's best for the community. Because what's best for the community is best for all of us as individuals. So that is one of the things that we had to take a look at. The other phrase that came up during our process was that collaboration and alignment equals success. And we're going to ask council moving forward as they implement our recommendations that they remember collaboration and alignment is what is going to actually equal success in this case. And you're going to need to remember that through the whole process because some of the asks are pretty big and they're going to require some pretty big actions moving forward. So the process, thank goodness we had city staff who are very organized and put us into some format of how to move forward because we probably would have been at the table a lot longer. As it was, we took probably a month longer than the community was expecting, but as you can see, the mandate was big. And so thank goodness staff was there, Shelley Legan and Jake leading us through the process. Staff has done some really amazing work, so thank you to them. It all started with an intake process. That happened in May and June. And what the intake process looked like was us receiving letters from all the various sectors in the city of Nanaimo, different groups being invited to share basically and answer questions about how has COVID affected your business or your community organization or your social organization, and how were you responding to that? We actually received quite a few letters back, and they were summarized for us, which is not in your report, but I'm going to share with you what they summarized sort of as the beginning phase for us. The themes and perspectives that came out of that for us at the end of June were things like this: active transportation. We need active and regional transportation development. We need connectivity and community. Housing. We need affordable housing. And you're going to hear us talk a little bit more about that. We need capital investment. We need the creation of a mandated public development corporation. We need to have investment in infrastructure. And we need to enhance the speed of permitting and the permitting process for development in our community. We need mandates around tourism and pride of place. We need designated tourist attractions, and we need an active campaign on pride of place. Sustainability is really important to our community. Long-term environmental sustainability, support regional agricultural and climate change planning, and food security is huge. I'm going to share a couple stats with you as we go along, things we found out about food security. Business supports and innovations are critical to our community. Support and accommodate businesses and industry to regain viability. Strong leadership and vision for a focused, well-funded revitalization of the downtown. Nanaimo COVID exchange collaboration. Reconciliation was a topic of discussion, and you'll see under our protocols, it's one of our guiding principles for this whole entire document and recommendation. We made it a guiding principle. Increase movement towards collective reconciliation to our First Nations community members. Health and well-being. How can you have a pandemic and not talk about health and well-being? Connect primary and specialist health care with services that support the social determinants of health. Elevated planning, which addresses the reintroduction of programs that support health of the city's seniors population. Socially inclusive policies and practices. And finally, Tech Hub. Comes up at every conversation you want to have about the city of Nanaimo and developing a tech hub, but create digital transformation supply chain cluster. So just through letters to our committee, we received letters about all of those topics, and that's a summary of what the community felt the priorities were. But as part of that intake process, we also had city staff provide us with updates on the city's strategic plan, the Reimagined Nanaimo project, what is the Health and Housing Task Force working on, And what is the Economic Development Task Force working on? So the one thing I really want to note is that before our task force was formed, you'd already formed a number of committees that were actively working in our community, gathering information, coming up with solutions, and working on problems. Because the pandemic was not the cause of all the issues that we're going to talk about tonight. It simply highlighted the importance of what things we needed to deal with and prioritize. But things like homelessness, opiate addictions, mental health issues, those things have existed in our community for a very long time. And COVID just shone a spotlight on those things and gave us, and this has provided us with an opportunity to hopefully put some things in place to help deal with those things. So we got updates regularly from the Health and Housing Task Force. That is a very, very busy task force. That when their final recommendations come forward, that's going to be a critical part of what this council does moving forward. The Economic Development Task Force has an integrated plan coming forward. If you haven't seen it yet, I've heard about it actually from the port perspective, but a change from what we've seen in the past and very well needed by our small businesses and to grow our business economy in Nanaimo. So the city is already in a lot of processes. That's something we had to template over our recommendations coming forward. It wasn't really our job to actually mimic or to recreate something we're already in the process of doing that's effective and happening. So your staff have actually been involved and engaged in all kinds of processes that are already ongoing and going to create opportunities for success moving forward. The second phase, which took us June through July, was the consultation phase, and that's when we brought groups in to actually talk to us and give us presentations from the outside. We had a whole morning where the social services sector came and talked to us. I think the thing that hit me the most from that meeting is that there are 1,000 families in our school system who rely on the school system to feed them. Those families do not have enough food to feed their children. And during a pandemic, we had to continue to feed them because they didn't have any food. So some of our recommendations going forward, I'm going to tie them back to some of these comments so you can see how everything is connected to each other in this community. We had a presentation from Dr. Mike Flesher, who's an emergency room ER doctor, and I have to say after this presentation, I thought I should just go home and lock myself in my house. I'm not sure how the rest of the task force felt, but when he talked about the second wave, which we're experiencing now, where he told us it would be worse than the first wave, the numbers would be higher, because the first wave never happened during a cold or flu season, and this second wave is happening during that time. It was depressing. It was depressing to hear the statistics coming out of the hospital when all elective surgeries are canceled, and we know that people having heart attacks and strokes are not going to our hospital and are dying in greater numbers because they're afraid to get help in a pandemic. So very enlightening information and very interesting. Dr. Mike Flesher actually, he's a first responder on global issues. So he responded to the Ebola crisis in Africa. We have that kind of knowledge base right here in Nanaimo advising us. We need to take advantage of that. We have those types of people right here at home. We heard great presentations from the regional district. I wasn't aware, but there was no disruption to bus service during COVID. Yes, the numbers were lower, but at no time was the bus service unavailable to people who needed to use it. I think that just shows a huge amount of dedication on behalf of those workers that work in these unknown circumstances, that they continue to provide service through that time. We heard from our school district. We heard from Scott Saywell, our superintendent. We heard that we only have a graduation rate of 83% of our students and 70% of Indigenous students. That needs to change. That is a grassroots problem in our community that needs to change. We heard great presentations about innovation and tech and opportunities for our community. We heard from Deb Saucier, who's here with us via Zoom tonight, about a changing university and what that looks like for the future as international students aren't able necessarily to come back to Nanaimo to participate, and we've relied so heavily on them in the past, how we have to change our thinking. So that was the consultation phase. The last phase was report generation from September through October. I want to let you know that on September 28th, when we were supposed to come to council, we had 28 recommendations for you. And then we sat down and we said to ourselves, and it's in the report, we said to ourselves, what is the role of the City of Nanaimo with respect to our recommendations? And I want to say it was Signe who brought this forward in a very clear manner for our committee, that the task force has defined the accountability of the city in this process to be that of a curator with responsibilities for coordinating and facilitating, not necessarily being restricted to funding and resourcing. This is a critical point because as we started to review our 28 suggestions, it became very apparent that what we were asking city staff to do is to take on more work and to pay for more things that wasn't necessarily going to allow them to happen. Our staff at City Hall are working pretty hard right now and putting more on their plate and asking them to do more without actually sharing the responsibility with other organizations in our community or provincially or federally that can take on some of that responsibility would be inappropriate on our part. And so we added this piece about the city being the curator, being the coordinator, being the facilitator of the actions that we're asking to come forward and taking a leadership role on these issues for our community. So tonight we're going to present you with some recovery recommendations. There are 3 main recovery recommendations and some resilience recommendations, and there are 3 of those in total, which boil down to 8 overall recommendations. But one thing I wanted to say before that about the recommendations, just to sort of give a framework, is that the Mayor's Task Force on Recovery and Resilience provides a thoughtful list of recommendations that addresses a cross-section of issues and opportunities with the view of strengthening the community during the post-pandemic. The task force has not generated all the answers. Here's the one thing I learned: there's no silver bullet in a pandemic. There's not one answer. I wish I could stand here to say we did all this great work and we found the answer. I'm sure the whole world would be coming here to ask us what it is. Quite frankly, we don't know the one answer, but we've come together with the following recommendations that we feel are key and have the potential for lasting impact on resilience, growth, and livability for our city. So I mentioned it earlier, there were some guiding principles under which we put our proposal together. And that's together that Mayor and Council have established working processes with local First Nations, particularly Snuneymuxw First Nations, and all underlying recommendation and action items of the task force are intended to invite further participation and respectful engagement with Snuneymuxw and other First Nations. The Mayor's Task Force stresses the importance to address and prioritize the city's role in implementing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to action and the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples for both First Nations and urban Indigenous. We pulled that out as a recommendation. We made it a guiding principle. That's how strongly we felt that this is important. But we wanted to recognize, because your staff shared with us, since 2018, this council and staff have taken many steps forward in strengthening the relationship, particularly with Snuneymuxw First Nations. We recognize that. We still thought it was important to be in the report as a guiding principle, but we also wanted to recognize your work on this and your commitment to this and say congratulations on that work. We appreciate that, and that great work needs to continue to move forward. So here we go. Recovery recommendations. I'm super excited about the first one, and I did not come up with this term. This was Shelley Legan, Nanaimo Builds. Be a Nanaimo builder. The reason I felt that was special is because I already am, and I thought, you know, maybe that meant that we're all going to be contractors like I am, but no, it means more than that. You heard it in the letters that I told you about that came out as themes. And one of the things that became very apparent to us is pride of place is lacking in our community. We need to take it back. This is a great place to live, to work, to raise our children. So I'm sure that every single one of you sitting in this room, like me, doesn't have to be here. I could take my work and my family and I could live in any community. But I, like you, have chosen to be here because this is a great place to be. We actually need to have a Nanaimo citizen-directed campaign. In some of our discussions, the mayor is the face of that campaign, but we need to instill enthusiasm for the natural and built assets, the opportunities we have here for education, recreation, culture, businesses, the sense of an existing vibrant community, and community support for those who are most vulnerable. In the port world, we often say, is my mic gone down? Okay. In the port world, we often say, if you're a port city, you're a lucky city, right? We know if you're a university city, you're a lucky city, right? That's because infrastructure like that provides huge opportunities for the people living here. And they provide jobs, well-paying jobs. They provide growth opportunities. We truly are a lucky and a blessed city because not only do we have those things, we have other great assets. Look where we live. Look where we live as the harbor city. We live in a beautiful environment that has been given to us as caretakers to care for the next generation. We need to build that enthusiasm within our community. So if you think about this for a minute, if we encouraged every single citizen to once a day share one positive thing about Nanaimo, and sure, at first they'd have to think about it, right? For the first couple of weeks, how long does it take to do something until it's a habit? I think it's 3 times or something, and a habit becomes, something that you do every day. But let's say every day, every single person in this room, in the course of their day, decided to say one positive thing about Nanaimo, like, hey, I really loved the bathtub weekend parade, or I really loved being able to walk my dog down at the waterfront, or have you been to Westwood Lake lately? It's really beautiful. If every single person in our community said one thing like that a day, after 3 times you've done that, it becomes a habit. Imagine what the conversation in our community would be. We need to build a campaign that is led by the community, and we all need to be Nanaimo builders. We need to build the spirit of Nanaimo. And we need to talk about it in a positive light. So that was our first recommendation. The second recommendation is that we would like to immediately have established a Mayor's Nanaimo Leaders Table. The purpose of that will to be informed by findings and recommendations from the various task forces and committees and other entities' plans to create an aligned approach and collaborate on multi-levels of government, ask for capital infrastructure for Nanaimo. So during our process, when we were doing our intake phases and whatnot, we had the opportunity to talk to organizations like the airport, the Port Authority, the university, and ask them to share their 5-year strategic plan with us. And they were interesting. They had lots of infrastructure built into them. They had lots of opportunities for the future built into them. And interestingly enough, they had a lot of ties that crossed each other, that it would be valuable for those groups and other like-minded groups to be in a room together to coordinate some of their vision moving forward as a community. You're going to see that as I talk a little bit further. You're going to see where those connected pieces are, where we try to draw those things together. We've done this in the past as a community, and we've been hugely successful, but we need to take this to the next level. And we need to include the social sector, the labor sector, tourism and hospitality. We need to expand that table a little bit and include some of those things. We need to leverage the great things we have in this community to get more of what we need, right? So like I said, that I get to choose to be in this community, not everybody has that choice. And COVID pointed that out. We need to leverage what we have to get what we need to help those people have a choice. And so we are asking that the Mayor's Task Force on Leadership be formed immediately to follow up on some of the work that we've done. We know from these strategic plans there's ongoing works at the university, for example, on health sciences buildings and other projects. We know there's work at the hospital going on to bring all those people to a table to be able to put together a plan that we can leverage as a community to get those services here. We've made some suggestions on who we think members of that team can be. But quite frankly, we've left it open-ended. We feel some of those people will come and go. That committee is going to need to draw other people from the community on as their conversation goes. Our third recommendation under recovery recommendations is to prioritize strategic investing. And we have some examples. The purpose here is to create a process or criterion to prioritize the strategic investment, recognizing Nanaimo as the heart of Vancouver Island. Imagine it. That's how we talked about it, the heart of Vancouver Island. To develop the best means to improve the economic and social position of the city. Specific focus to be given to the following projects. We talked about sites in the downtown node. You heard me talk about it from the information we got back from the public about their concern about revitalizing the downtown. There are some sites downtown that need to be specifically addressed, and we'd like to see the city take a proactive role in that. We heard from the Port of Nanaimo that there's a logistics hub planned as part of our strategic plan. You would have already heard about the funding we received as a port for our deep sea port to enable short sea shipping, which is a strategic plan of Canada to increase our trade around the world, which is exciting for Nanaimo. But the Port of Nanaimo wants to take it one step further. We want to see a logistics hub that deals with goods and services. The Port of Nanaimo is the port of Vancouver Island. All goods come and go basically through the Port of Nanaimo. So imagine this. You heard me talk about the 1,000 families who didn't have food. Imagine a plan with a logistics hub that has a component that talks about food sustainability for Vancouver Island and making sure our children are fed. Imagine those things that, sorry, I'm not clicking, am I? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not clicking, sorry. So anyways, imagine those things, and this is where I'm talking about how the plan all interconnects to each other. So that was one of the things we put on the list. Those of you sitting at the table know that I'm pretty passionate about tertiary hospital. I'm pretty passionate about healthcare as a whole. This council has made a unanimous motion to support a tertiary hospital in Nanaimo. That's because you know Nanaimo's already been designated a tertiary hospital, and you know that we just have not been given the funds for the infrastructure. So we are going to see an ICU start construction in January, which is exciting. We need it. We were listed the COVID hospital north of the Malahat, which services 430,000 people, and we have 9 ICU beds. And we're responsible for 430,000 people. And you wonder why people having heart attacks and strokes aren't going to our hospitals. I had one of my acquaintances who's a doctor say to me, we are going to measure the damage of COVID in body bags, and it will not be body bags from those who died from COVID. It will be body bags of those who died because they didn't have access to care at our hospital. That should scare you a little bit. We have the oldest population in Canada, and you've heard this from me before. I'm preaching to the converted. But our population, our community needs to know how important this is to us, and we need to advocate to get the rest of the funding we need. If we can believe the campaign promises, we're getting a cancer clinic next, and that's great. When I see the hole for that, we need a cath lab right behind it. And so a tertiary hospital is important to us. VIU connectedness, both physical, okay, and I know that your staff are working on a connected or complete streets plan to physically connect us to the VIU campus. We need that to be physical in that respect, and we need it to be digital through black fiber. We need to start creating some of these connected pieces. I talk about a tertiary hospital. How far behind do you think the conversation is on a medical education program at VIU if the tertiary hospital actually happens? You see how these things are connected? They're all connected to each other. Waterfront assets. We want to accelerate the investment in waterfront assets to attract tourists and enhance livability, including the Departure Bay Walkway. We have a gem in Ann Arbor. We have the ability to provide more access to that, not only to our general public, but people will come here to spend time there, and we need to actually put that infrastructure into play. You actually have a fabulous waterfront walkway plan. I'm sure you've all seen it. I've seen it at the port office. We need to make that happen. We need to build a transportation hub inclusive of a transit exchange now. and accelerate the required negotiations of stakeholders and find the funding required to make this happen. The increased accessibility of city transit will have direct impact on marginalized citizens. It will provide better access to our university. It will provide better access to our hospital, and we are lacking it. We heard about the commitment of our staff, right? We heard that there was no disruption in bus service. We just don't have a transit hub, and we don't have enough of the transit that we need to get people to their medical appointments or get them to their university classes or get them where they need to go. We learned through this process there's opportunity for some provincial funding on this. We need to take advantage of that piece. And technology readiness. Create digital infrastructure necessary to support expansion and attraction of technology-based businesses. I have to tell you that we specifically talked about how important this is to the university, how important this is to the hospital, and how important this is to the downtown. It all comes back to us being connected to each other. This will allow us then to attract those businesses that we always talk about, the tech sector. We need to have the infrastructure in the ground to get them to actually come here. And so on prioritizing strategic investing, these were the pieces we came forward to. You can see how they tie back to the Nanaimo Leaders Table and how they work their way into a pride of place conversation. They're all connected to each other, and under recovery recommendations, those are what we're putting forward this evening. Under resiliency recommendations, these have a little bit different flavor, but are equally, if not more so, important. The first is to publicly launch, under reconciliation and anti-racism, the first is to publicly launch an anti-racism awareness program that promotes diversity and inclusivity of our Nanaimo community. This is a great community. We need to promote that. And we talked about, the mayor kindly mentioned what's happening right now with the United Nations and what they're promoting. We need to be leaders in that, and we need our city to stand up and be a leader in launching these type of campaigns and making a statement. Our second recommendation is to prepare for future events. Prioritize the emergency preparedness and resiliency measures with appropriate actions and level and accessibility of funding necessary to address any future events that trigger a state of emergency. Now, it became very apparent to us that a pandemic is the topic of the day today. An earthquake could be the topic next year. Massive forest fires could be the topic of the following year, and floods the year after that. And we actually need to be ready as a community for all of those things and other things I couldn't possibly describe. A pandemic just happens to be what's happening right now. And so we have some very specific recommendations around these for specific purposes. The first is to establish personal protective equipment, PP&E stores, for city employees and social agencies. So it came to our attention that you did have actually a stock of PP&E, but it had expired. And it was brought to our attention that social agencies were expected to go out in the field and feed the 1,000 families who didn't have food, and work with the homeless, and work with our opiate-addicted people, and work with our mentally ill people, and were given no personal protection equipment. That is not acceptable. But the fact that you had a store pile tells me a lot of things. It tells me that you actually were looking to the future and you'd planned for it. We think there needs to be a system in place where that rotates, in a partnership maybe with Island Health, where the initial stockpile is put in place, they use it, it rotates through, and then it won't expire. But we'd like to see our municipality have their own stockpile of PP&E. I can tell you the hospital called people like myself to ask them to help get our hospital workers and our frontline workers more PP&E. And our community, I have to tell you, our community stepped right up to the plate. And that was great to see, particularly as we were as a COVID center. The next proposal under preparing for future events, I have to actually give credit to this to Ian Simpson on our committee. He brought this idea forward, and I personally think it's brilliant. Wastewater monitoring and surveillance technology implementation. There's technology available that if we were to monitor our wastewater, we would be able to tell the extent of things like COVID-19, what's happening, what those numbers really are in our community, and what's happening, and we would know them in advance. We would know them sooner rather than later. We would be more prepared moving forward, and we would be able to deal with the situation in a quicker manner. And so we're making that one of our recommendations this evening. Our next recommendation is ensure community emergency reception center is appropriately equipped in case of an emergency. So during Dr. Flesher's conversation, one of the things that became apparent is to be successful in a pandemic, when you're designated a pandemic center, is you can't have all of your people who think they have COVID, who may or may not have it, show up at the hospital. Because then nobody else who actually needs services can go there. Our heart attack and our stroke patients, they can't actually go there because they're afraid that they're going to get COVID. So you need a secondary location. And you have one. It's the Beban Social Center has been designated as that. And that's great. I would challenge council to look at is whether you are actually prepared at that location for an emergency. Do you have backup power readily available? Do you have water stores available there? How many people can you accommodate? Because as a growing population, and we've been fairly safe through the pandemic, we know people are moving here because we're a safe community. As those numbers grow, we need to make sure that those facilities are stocked and ready to go so that we can respond in a timely manner. We need that to be a priority for council moving forward. We know you get lots of spending requests. We feel this is a critical one. Make sure you're ready. And last, under preparing for future events, create a technology-enabled internet platform to connect citizens for mutual aid during emergencies. You know, the general public in our community in particular are pretty innovative and creative on their own. And Councillor Brown brought this to our attention and showed us what it was. And that actually happened during the pandemic, is that there was an internet-based sort of social networking group that could put what they needed on the internet and find people to volunteer to help them. Some of the needs are probably pretty extreme. Some of the needs may seem minor, but they're not trivial. They're like a senior locked in their home by themselves who is isolating and has no contact with anybody else and just needs someone to call them and make sure they're okay. Or somebody needs food delivered to them because they're with a vulnerable person and they can't go out to the grocery store to get their food and they just need someone to pick it up and deliver it to their house. Simple human needs that other people in the community can actually help them with. And this started through our community, but it's grown to an unwieldy size. And we actually need now some form of proper technology platform that will allow that to go forward. And really, I think it just highlights the great people in our community doing great things for other people, no matter how small, how big. It's just about being a human being caring about other people. And we'd like to see this platform established in Nanaimo. We feel if you establish something like this in Nanaimo, you could roll it out to other communities throughout Canada and abroad. We think that this will actually bring our community closer together. Our last major recommendation under resiliency recommendations is about supporting, see I got that this time, support for small business. So I'm a past chair of the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce, so I know that the majority of businesses in Nanaimo are SMEs. They're small to medium enterprises. And COVID was not kind to small to medium enterprises, specifically in specific sectors like restaurants, in hotels, in tourism. Some of us, I'm a small business owner myself in construction, we were mandated to be essential service. We're lucky. And where they could, the federal and provincial governments leapt in with programs that in some ways helped, in some ways didn't. But here are the recommendations around small businesses that we have, because they are the backbone of our community here in Nanaimo and in the province as a whole, and actually in Canada on a broader scale. So the first was to support elimination of provincial speculation and vacancy tax for Nanaimo. We need that gone. I would have liked to have seen more discussion about that during our recent provincial election, and this is one thing we need, this group at this table, we need you to take that on. We need that gone for Nanaimo. That hurts us, and it needs to go away. We need to work with small business community to leverage lessons learned through the following, and here's some suggestions. Support services that assist small business organizations through educational efforts about economic resiliency strategies. You know, the thing I found about small business owners pretty consistently is they're innovative, they're creative, and they work really hard. In almost all cases in a small business, the person who owns the business works in the business. So they're not somebody sitting at home with a whole bunch of employees. They're quite often working side by side with their employees. They're engaged in their business, and they know their clients. They know their client base. And because of that, through COVID, there's been some huge successes. I just want to point out the tourism industry. So who here ever thought that the snowbirds in Canada would think Vancouver Island was the place to come spend your winter? Right? Why don't you try and book a campground through the winter on Vancouver Island? That's not going to happen because Canada realizes that we're a great place to be. There's an innovative, creative idea. I saw the advertisements on TV this last week about come spend your winter on Vancouver Island. I mean, I'm going to spend my winter here because I know this is a great place, but everybody else is about to find out. And they're coming here in droves. Businesses have had to be, those who've survived have had to be creative and innovative. And we need to share those lessons with other businesses. We need to review current taxation methods to determine creative opportunities to address social and homeless concerns. I have more I could say on this, but my hand has been slapped enough. We need to look at some of the taxes that we're collecting and how we reinvest them with those who are not so fortunate in our community and how we address those issues. One of the major complaints we heard about the downtown core, it's not safe, there's so many homeless people, how are we dealing with that? We know this is a provincial issue, we know the housing is a provincial issue, but how can we be creative as a community in how we address that? And I think we need to review some of those current taxation guidelines. The other thing we're asking this council to do is to connect through the federal government. I suspect it's going to be through UBCM or other lobbying organizations to initiate a review of the CERB program and provide guidance and advice to ensure future program responses to unemployment are more effective. So the one complaint I hear in my industry is that CERB has made it so that anyone making really in the $15 to $20 range didn't come back to work when they could have, even though there was work available. They opted to be on a program. So in some ways it was a disincentive. There are other programs that were implemented that will have similar effects, and we need the federal government to hear back from us as a community and through your organization that represents municipalities about what those negative impacts and what positive things came out of that. Obviously, there were some positive results, and many people needed that tax benefit, and then there are those who took advantage. And so we need to give some feedback to the federal government so that moving forward, they can appropriately respond. And last but not least is to develop transportation and digital infrastructure strategy to help sustain small businesses. I've talked about this before. It's about connectedness. It's about connecting us digitally, connecting us physically so that we can act as a community. So this is the point in the presentation where I'm supposed to say thank you. But I just want to add a couple of words at the end. This has been an interesting process. It took us a month longer than we actually anticipated. I think the entire task force would agree with me that it was challenging. It was heart-wrenching to hear some of the things that were going on. It was exciting to hear some of the things that were going on. And I want to be blunt. There are a lot of people who are going to look at this report and say, well, we were looking for the magic answer for our industry, our sector, our social organization. And if you look at how we put the report together, how they are connected, and how the projects are laid out, and how the resiliency pieces are laid out, they're meant to be connected to each other as a community, and therefore affect all of us and provide benefit to all of us. It would have been impossible for us to give, like I said, the magic answer for what's going on to each individual. But we do feel that these recommendations moving forward will benefit us as a community. They'll make us stronger. They'll make us more ready for the next event, because there will be something else. This is not it. And not only that, they will just overall make us better as a community. A lot of these issues existed prior to COVID. Homelessness, opiate addictions, mental health issues, all those things existed before. This just highlighted how they affect our community. And so I want to thank the mayor for asking me to sit on the task force, and I think I probably speak for our task force on that. And I want to challenge the citizens of Nanaimo who are not involved, who don't feel that this recommendation has any place for them. My challenge to them is, you are a member of this community. You need to contribute, you need to get involved, and you need to be part of the solution, because it involves all of us. Thank you.
Ms. Hayes, as you know, we don't clap in council and we don't boo, although I think we're tempted to do so.
Okay.
I just want to say briefly before I open it up for questions, obviously council, no one's expecting a notice of motion tonight. We are going to digest this report and hopefully move ahead with its recommendations. I know that the task force members are ready to answer questions if necessary, so
Do you guys want to come up?
over to council. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And I don't actually have a question.
Okay.
I want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody who was on the task force. Thank you to you, Donna, for an incredible presentation that was so filled with passion. We have been working so hard in Nanaimo for pride in our city, because we are the best city in this world as far as I'm concerned. We have everything that people could want, right? For all levels of people. So I challenge everybody on council who's not on social media, and everybody in the room. I like the idea of posting something positive we saw, heard in Nanaimo, and get this moving, because our city, if we work together and with our pride and our determination, we will just continue to shine. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you. Just on one of your recommendations, number 4, with the anti-racism. I don't know if you're aware, but there's already a group, and we meet regularly with the MPs, MP Manley, MLA, and all that. So that might be something you could piggyback on. I'm part of that. It's called Resiliency BC, and it's Nanaimo Ladysmith Spoke. So it does exist, just so you're aware. But my question is, when on your recommendation number 6, support elimination of provincial speculation vacancy tax.
Yep.
That's something that the previous council tried very hard to get us out of. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit further for us? Because some people believe it's a good thing, while others think it's not so.
I don't want to be the only speaker. We have a whole task force. James, do you want to come speak to that? This one's good for me. Okay, I just want to let you know the whole task force made the recommendations. So I understand the intent behind the province implementing it. And I can see in large centers like Vancouver and Victoria where those pieces come into play. But reality is, it's a detriment here for people who, and here's my clear example. I just supported bringing a worker in through the immigration program because I needed somebody in my management team. And I looked across Canada, and then I did the immigration program. He can't buy a home here in Nanaimo, sold his home in the UK, can't buy a home here in Nanaimo unless he pays a 40% tax to be able to afford to buy a home here. So he's forced into rental housing, even though he could afford, he sold his home in the UK, he can afford to buy a nice home here and live here. The thing for me is that it becomes a detriment to people coming here to work here if you can't buy a home here. I'm lucky he only found that out when he got here, and hopefully he's not listening this evening. When he got here, because he could have taken a job, he could have taken a job somewhere else in the interior that wouldn't have put that restriction on him. And that gives us an unfair disadvantage when we're competing for workers, as an example, to come here, right? We see that instead of selling homes here, they just moved to Parksville or Qualicum or to Ladysmith, and they're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into homes, and it's not coming to Nanaimo. And it's not fair to a community of our size, and we are an affordable community, right? And so that needs to come away so that we can have a level playing field.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you, Ms. Hayes, to you and all of your committee members, task force members. Important information, and it's going to take a while to digest it all. There's several things I'd like to comment on, but a couple of perhaps good news items regarding recommendation number 5B, wastewater monitoring and surveillance technology implementation. I just want to make you aware that of course, you know that Nanaimo is the main partner in the Regional District of Nanaimo, which oversees liquid waste treatment and so on. And we have actually reached out on 2 occasions to Island Health to offer RDN laboratory facilities for monitoring wastewater. We haven't been taken up on that offer, but we have made the effort, so we will continue to do so. Excellent. The other item I'd like to comment on briefly, if I may, is the third recommendation, which I find very interesting, about strategic investing. And I just wanted to focus on F, the transportation hub. And again, I reference the Regional District of Nanaimo, which has actively advocated with the Minister of Transportation for a Vancouver Island master transportation plan with Nanaimo as the hub. And so we're trying to push that. I wanted to ask you specifically, is rail a part of that? Do you see any future for rail as part of a transportation hub? Can I put you on the spot for that one?
You can put me on the spot, and actually I can speak to this as the chair of the Port Authority. Rail's really important. We think it's important for moving people, but for us at the port, it's even more important for moving cargo. If we're seriously going to be taken to be a serious player in the world of moving and shipping goods, we need rail. So that's why we labeled F as build a transportation hub. The Transit Exchange is part of that, and we're aware that the RDN is actively working on that. We wanted to bring it to the forefront so that it would get more attention. The other thing that we think is critical in the transportation hub, so rail is important. Nanaimo has 3 ferry terminals. We need more connectedness there. We've got at least two seaplane operators. We've got a helicopter, a helijet coming in here. We're all talking about a fast ferry. When you leave Vancouver or wherever you're coming from, we need a transportation hub where you can this is how I look at it. If my daughter's coming to visit me and I'm at the hospital, I need her to be able to get on the plane, get on the helijet or whatever, get to the transportation hub and get to the hospital to see me without taking a car. And we don't have that ability right now. There's no interconnectedness piece there. It's very difficult unless you're very organized and have done it a whole bunch of times. We need that transportation hub to be more accessible to those types of transportation.
Absolutely agree. Thank you very much. Really important stuff to focus on. Just one more quick point I'll just share with you, that I've had several calls recently from citizens really concerned about Nanaimo's hospital and wanting the upgrade. We need a tertiary hospital, and I think that should be a priority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you to Ms. Hayes and the task force members. This is really, like Councillor Thorpe said, this is really important information for us to consider. Just a couple of concepts. So Pride of Place, I'm a huge supporter of this, and I think we saw this a little bit in the 2018 campaign, where ideas were generated and there was a lot of excitement. And I say that because I was involved, I was immersed in it. But there's these waves, I feel, where people acknowledge that Nanaimo really is as amazing as we all know it is. And just an anecdote, I live in the South End, downtown, kind of a rougher neighborhood. And a young gentleman had been kind of walking my block for some time. And I finally, hey, who are you? How you doing? And he was from a Toronto firm that runs a huge technology platform, and they had just dissolved their physical office and just said to their employees, who were making really good wages, we'll pay you wherever you are, you just have to be connected to the internet. So he had flown from Toronto, he was in his early 30s, was staying at an Airbnb in our community, and was just kind of shopping the island. And it was a really good opportunity for me to, this Nanaimo has this and that and the other thing. But I think Pride of Place is something that we've always struggled with, and I think if we can nail it, that will be a major leap forward for how people experience our city.
If I can just follow up on that, you know what I
Yeah.
find interesting in the conversations, and because particularly at the port, I'm having them all the time, is what people from the outside of Nanaimo think of us. They all think it's spectacular here. You know, it's funny when they come over to think about having their business here, they're selling Nanaimo to us and we live here, right? And so we need to recoup some of that energy, some of that, some of what's going on there, and we need to project it back because everybody who wasn't here, who came here for a reason, ask them why they came here.
A couple of other quick points. The city is curator. This is a big concept at the Health and Housing Task Force table, and
Yep.
this is the idea that the city doesn't have the jurisdiction to do all of the things it wants to do, and the things that impact its citizens are not necessarily things that we can readily address through taxation. However, if the city can rise above that kind of milieu and be a coordinating person within whether the social well-being sphere, economic development, whatever that looks like, the city as curator, I think, is a really important concept for all of us to consider going forward. And finally, coordinating resources and strategic investing. So those 1,000 families that the school district fed. One of the things that really struck me with COVID is that we had this influx of funding like so many other communities had, but we didn't have a place to go, okay, community, what are our 3 top things and how are we going to distribute this? You know, the school district did great work feeding those 1,000 families, but we know we have a food bank that requires a warehouse that would ensure that the entire community was fed through any pandemic, but we're feeding the 1,000 families through the school district because that's the immediate need. And so I'm really invested, and I appreciate that you've shared this in your presentation, but looking at investment as something that we collectively figure out where we want dollars to go, so we're not doing these kind of patchwork things. In terms of a large thing like a pandemic, that's really important for keeping things running smoothly and keeping our most vulnerable supported in difficult times.
And I think that under the recommendations where we talk about the mayor's leaders table, it has a completely different face than you maybe would have seen prior to pandemic, because who we suggested as sitting at the table was with a specific recognition for that in the past, those social agencies haven't sat at that table, and neither have some of the labor organizations, some of those other groups. And it's really time for us to leverage those positive pieces that we know are coming to get the pieces we need. And to have that happen, we need all those people to sit at the table. So that was a critical change in thinking to make that task force unique.
Thank you for your work.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation. When we do our Health and Housing Task Force, can you do that one too? Because that was awesome.
Signy's going to do it for you? I'm just volunteering it right now.
I do have a couple of notes here. I was making something. Further to Councillor Thorpe's comments about the RDN and monitoring wastewater. At our last liquid waste monitoring committee meeting, that actually was brought up, and that is actually taking place in conjunction with University of Victoria. And so I'm hoping that that will evolve into even a permanent point there. And I think it connects to preparing for the future, where this could be a selling point in terms of Nanaimo is we've seen a pandemic, we realized that where we were lacking, and we've actually built our infrastructure to prepare for future things. So if you want to feel safe when something else happens, this is the place to live.
Exactly.
And so I think fixing all those things so that in the event that we're like giving more infrastructure to our emergency resources, I think would be phenomenal. In terms of your technology, prioritizing strategic investments, and I know we're probably going to be talking about this in the GPC or something like that, but I'd like to refer everyone to the final discussion at the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance Summit. And each year, the MNP does an economic update for Vancouver Island. And they touch base on something that is happening in where, because of the pandemic, everybody's working from home. And then everybody decided, well, we like working from home. So, and we're not going to go back to the office. And I know that my daughter's working in Victoria with an organization there. They have 2 offices. They're going to close one. They don't need it anymore. Both of my daughter and son-in-law have moved back to Nanaimo. Neither of them work for a company in this province, and one doesn't even work in this country, works for a company not in the United States. So I think when we were talking with John Hankins earlier in our mandate about attracting businesses and tech hubs there was this idea of this critical mass where we didn't have enough companies to attract the employees, and there wasn't enough employees to attract the companies. So why don't we just concentrate on one? Why don't we look to attract the employees who no longer have to work in an office because they can work anywhere now, and that seems to be the norm, of moving to this place where the real estate is relatively cheap to places like Vancouver and Toronto, Calgary, and attract those. And at that point, we will have the critical mass of employees to attract the businesses. So I think if we flip that around and just concentrate on one thing, that would probably work out. There's a couple other spots here.
Maybe I can just, Councillor Bonner, maybe I could just make a quick comment on that, because I have a personal experience with this. My daughter works in Vancouver. She works for a digital media company. She works for Nickelodeon making kids' TV shows. She worked straight through the pandemic. Matter of fact, she got a big promotion during the pandemic while she was working in her condo, where she's been since March 16th. She said to me, Mom, do you think I should come home and work? And I said, you know, I would love that. I would love to see you every day. Mm-hmm. You know, the big issue is, we don't have the fiber here to support what she does for a living, so she can't come back and live here and work. I think part of our point of this task force was to say we need to invest in infrastructure, because as soon as you have the infrastructure, it's a no-brainer. They're coming to live here. They're coming to work here, because look what we offer, right? We're affordable. You can do anything in a day. You can go skiing, you can go golfing, you can go hiking, go biking, sailing, snorkeling, whatever you want to do, you can do all of it here. The problem is, right now, I would say it's almost backwards to think, well, we'll get the tech companies here, but we have no infrastructure to offer them. But I can tell you right now, the university, the hospital, those areas could use that infrastructure. That's a reason all by itself to get that infrastructure here, and those people would move here if you had the infrastructure.
I think the infrastructure is coming, because I just had fiber installed in my house on Friday.
You did, but it was residential grade, and we need something a little bit more than that.
Eventually, it'll be up to 1 gig. So it's there, and that's an option through TELUS.
Yeah.
But it's coming. I'm quite hoping that's the case. Under 5, number D, creating a technology-based internet platform. That's just programming, and we have seen many municipalities create their own programs.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we should do. Well, Winnipeg designed their own election platform software for all the candidates they have there. Campbell River on a regular basis gives away $50,000 in prizes just for innovation ideas that people present. So those are the things I think we should start looking at.
And that's a saleable piece. I think if we develop it here, you could sell it worldwide.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And I'm quite interested in your current taxation methods to determine creative opportunities. I don't know who's slapping your hand, but we should take them out. But I'm quite interested to see what sort of examples you might have for that.
I'm not saying that on the record. There are different ways that taxes are applied in this community. Without speaking to any specific, I'll speak to my own sector ones. We know there's development cost charges. There are community contributions. There are taxes that are like that form part of the development committee. Maybe we look at different ways about that. Was not my specific example in this case. And I know that we have the housing fund and all those type of stuff. But there are other taxes that are levied in this community that maybe we look at taking a portion of them and reallocating and looking at it a different way. I just think the pandemic, and I think the group agrees with you, the pandemic shone a light on the haves and the have-not situation. And we need to take that situation, dump it on its head, relook at how some of that taxation is structured, and maybe reallocate it that benefits the community in a different way that will be a better way moving forward.
Thank you. All my questions. Thanks.
Councillor Kesselbrook.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Hayes. I just want to say a big thank you for your work and the work of the task force. I think part of resilience and recovery is really building a strong relationships, and just noting, everybody taking the time out of their the busy time during the COVID pandemic to get together and problem solve and brainstorm for the community. And I think that it's really important. I like the recommendation about the mayor's leadership table is to keep those dialogue going. And I think it's really important to build a diverse representation on that table, because I think what can happen is we can really work in silos, and we do need to put in the effort of building a shared unified voice and vision for the community. And part of that is a really strong shared voice to ask, the senior levels of government for the investment that we need to deal with the big issues that we're facing. And so I really look forward to seeing that move forward, and then the other recommendations that were made. So thank you, and thank you for everybody's time.
Thanks.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will keep it quick because I know you'll have some words to say. But Donna, Ian, Signe, James, Deb, I just wanted to thank you all. It was a commitment, especially over the summertime. You're all busy, and I know there was a lot of stressful things going on in your own world. So thank you for that commitment to your community and answering that call. I also thank Jake, Dale, and in particular Shelley Lagan really deserve a thank you as well. They put in a lot of time on a quite rapid schedule, and that can always be tough. But I also actually want to send a big thank you to the folks that, whether it was in response to the letters, taking that time, there was a lot of well thought out responses that I don't think was just a sit down for 15 minutes. It was a sit down for several hours and think through your thoughts and put them on paper. So all those folks that answered it and helped shape this, and even those that didn't maybe got a letter, but they were throwing out ideas in their conversations. I know with myself, but I know with others as well. So I just want to say thank you to all those folks, in particular you, but all those folks that spent that time thinking about what building back better and what recovery and what resilience might look like. And I think often we think that when we get the plan or we get the document that it's a finished product, but it's actually a launching off point. And I think there's some heavy lifting here for the mayor as he moves forward, but I know he will welcome that and do a good job facilitating the leaders table, which I do really think is important, especially around those concepts of expanding and exploding it out more than what we might traditionally think to make sure that connectivity happens. So just a really big thank you for that commitment and the effort.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Yes, I'm going to say a few words, but I'll try and keep it to a few words. Firstly, there's that dreadful old expression, somewhat sexist in origin, that, success has many fathers and failure is well, it's a word you can't use in family time because no one wishes to be identified as the father. Well, let me say in this case that this presentation tonight, the results of all the work of the task force, has many parents. And I want to start off by mentioning Mr. Rudolph, our CAO, and Councillor Brown, who came to me individually in the springtime and suggested that maybe a task force would be a good idea. And I teasingly said to them both a little time afterwards that if both Councillor Brown and the CAO thought that it was a good idea, it was a good idea. And I give them the credit for the genesis of this. I then want to thank a few other members of staff, Mr. Lindsay, Ms. Lagan as well, Mr. Rudolph, of course, other staff who participated, Fernez Faroki, our communications person, Mr. Corson, all of various folks who participated, and I've probably left somebody out, and they can slap me in the morning and I'll send out an apologetic email. But I particularly want to thank the members of the task force, the other five, as we'll call them apart from myself and Councillor Brown. You pay me to be mayor, you pay Councillor Brown to do his job. Without commenting on whether people think we're over or underpaid, what I can say for certain is that none of the five of you, President Saucier, Ms. Hayes, Mr. Simpson, Mr. Byrne, and Ms. Madden, none of you were paid to do this work. I think the best we could that would qualify for remuneration would have been muffins and coffee occasionally and things of that nature. This is what a really good community looks like. It means that people who are already busy and committed and concerned, when they're asked, if they haven't already volunteered, When they're asked, because of the talents they bring and the desire to make this the kind of community that we believe it is and can even be better in the future, they step forward and they do the work. And so I just want to say, particularly to the five and Councillor Brown, because this is above the pay grade of a councillor, this kind of extra work, I just want to say a particular thank you on behalf of the citizens of Nanaimo. It doesn't have all the answers, Ms. Hayes is right. But on the other hand, does anyone ever have all the answers, and does anything ever give us all the answers? The answers are going to come by the implementation of these recommendations, assuming that Council will support the document. And the job is then on Council's shoulders and then on the leaders' table, if you will, that follows, and the individual citizens who have received the rallying cry tonight from Ms. Hayes, as she so eloquently put it. We're all part of a community. You know, you can be, Mr. Rudolph often refers to the term citizens versus taxpayers, a phrase I've come to love, but I like to also refer to citizens versus residents. Just living here isn't enough. Living here is the benefit that you get by being here. Being a citizen is making it a wonderful place for all your fellow citizens and residents. And we have an opportunity, as I've said over and over again, this is a great time in this community's history. As we lead into Remembrance Day, if I can take us back a little bit, and we think about what this nation was like 100 years ago, which was a rural nation that was changed remarkably by the effects of the First World War, and by the early 20s had in fact become an urban nation, more of the population living in cities, and where we've come and what this city looked like and what this city was like 50 and 60 years ago. And I'm thinking of Councillor Turley, for instance, who's a long-time resident and citizen. The old town's changed, and I just think all those changes have not come without resistance on occasion, but there's always been good people who are prepared to cut the path ahead, so to speak, to break the ground, to move us forward. I think of the ancient history of this community that's been home to the Snuneymuxw First Nation for thousands of years. As we move through the reconciliation process, which will never end, I suspect, maybe not in my lifetime, maybe in my grandchildren's lifetime, when we'll have put to bed the uglier sides of our parts of our history, but not forgetting it, this community can move forward to a really bright future. We are a blessed people in a blessed land in a blessed part of the world, and I'm just really, really grateful that you good people stepped forward. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
It's over to us now.
Okay.
Well, Inspector Fletcher, it's now on to the next presentation, the quarterly update.
Do you want me to grab them?
Goodbye.
Good night, President Saucier. Good evening. And welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Sheila, did you say it was this the other side? Okay. The other side. There we go. Thank you. Through your worship, to the council, thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Inspector Lisa Fletcher, and I'm the acting OIC at the Nanaimo Detachment. And today I'm here to provide an overview of some of the detachment's pressing issues into our third quarter. And we're there. So, a brief overview of where we're going to go during this presentation. We're going to give a brief introduction to our priorities and how we establish the impact that COVID has had on our detachment, our current issues, and some of our partners. our detachment strategic priorities are initially developed at the national level, and then we look at them with a provincial focus, then through our district here on the island, and then at the detachment level, and how we kind of apply that at a boots application to the streets. And in really plain language, I wanted to give an overview of what we're covering. So for crime and victimization, this is how the detachment is addressing the individual impact of crime in our community, and specifically the detachment is looking at prolific offenders. We're looking at a crime reduction unit where we're identifying the prolific offenders in crime vulnerable areas, and we're working to reduce the impact on the community through law enforcement and our community partnerships. The second priority is guns and gangs, or organized and serious crime. Locally at the detachment, we've been working with our other RCMP partnerships through our headquarters units, as well as other crime enforcement partners who are experts in this area, and we've recently had some significant arrests of identified key individuals involved with organized crime, and we're pleased to see that success. In terms of harm reduction, again, this work can't be done without our partnerships, and that's at the provincial health partners, VIU, local groups, and looking at ways to reduce the impacts of addiction that we're seeing in our community. This year, it was very sad news in that we had a triple overdose, and the impact of that is just devastating as that ripples through a community. The toxicity of the street drugs is truly frightening, and it's through this multi-pronged approach addressing both the high and the low levels of drug use within the community that we need to focus. Indigenous and cultural competence. This is the health and safety of our Indigenous communities. And I do need to make a note on one of the later slides. I incorrectly identified the acronym as IDP. It should be IPS, which is Indigenous Policing Services. Through this, we work with our partner governance and our service providers to build grassroots relationships. Examples include foot patrols, band council resolutions, working closely with our community leaders in our communities, both Snuneymuxw and Snuneymuxw. Traffic service. Our Nanaimo Detachment Traffic Unit is recognized on the island for their expertise and their commitment to road safety. We recently had some success, as you're aware, out at Jack Point. The detachment is addressing our road safety through various crime initiatives, focusing on individual efforts to make our streets safer, as well as taking what we're learning through those individual contacts into a crime reduction strategy to increase the impact in our community. COVID. That has touched absolutely every impact of what we are doing at the detachment this year, as everyone can appreciate. As first responders, obviously we worked throughout the first wave and are working into the second wave, and it impacted everything from our operations to the work that we were receiving. During the second quarter, we saw a very significant reduction in our file load, as everyone was primarily staying within their residences and all but essential services were closed. As we move into our third quarter, we're starting to see the trend move back towards a more normal file load. We're still currently 13% under last year's third quarter, so there is still an impact that we're attributing to COVID. And then along with that, as everyone closed up their businesses and so forth, we saw a reduction in the property offenses, a decrease in motor vehicle collisions and offenses as people just weren't driving as long or as far. And what we did see an increase in was social disturbances, which was generally disputes and arguments within families. As everyone was kind of stuck together, it maybe magnified things a bit more. One of the partnerships that's been key through this is working with the Public Health Office and the Public Health Inspectors. Our bike unit specifically has been working very closely with the health inspector in terms of the partnerships with restaurants, liquor license establishments, as well as our engagement with areas that have been pulling together larger groups. We saw some of the beaches and some of the park areas in the summer. In preparation for Halloween this year, we did some communication through our media relations officer, and then we had a team that was prepared on Friday and Saturday night if the community responded with large parties, which I'm very happy to say they didn't. We had a very peaceful Halloween with everyone quite engaged within their own personal safety, which was very complimentary. We did have a lot of fireworks, and I kind of joked that that was Captain Fry's challenge, but we did help out and attend quite a few firework calls, but that was the main issue this past weekend. Moving to our third quarter, as I stated, we have seen a 13% reduction during this quarter in comparison to last year's stats. The volume has been increasing from what we saw in the spring, summer. However, the one area that has increased that is somewhat concerning are persons offenses, so violence related to individuals. And we've seen the numbers haven't climbed in comparison. They've remained the same in comparison to last year, which generally means that they're higher, but we've also seen an increase in the severity of the injuries and the crime perpetrated, which is concerning. Our property offenses have been significantly lower. We're hoping that that is a realistic account of the property crime and not a lack of reporting. It's very important that people report crimes that they're experiencing. We use that information to target specific areas for crime reduction initiatives. If we don't have real data, then it's hard to do the real work. Our traffic accidents have decreased, and we're attributing probably that to less people driving as people aren't commuting. Okay, there is a digit missing on the top one. There should be an extra 0, so that should be 1,360. These are the top 10 types of calls that come into our detachment, and I thought that might be of interest to yourselves and the public. So one of the #1 things we get called on is traffic incidences. And then you'll see a little bit of a trend in terms of unwanted persons checking on well-being, disturbances, and a little bit further down, suspicious persons and assist police, fire, ambulance. All of those calls are related to individuals in your community that the residents are concerned about in some way, shape, or form. Either they appear unhealthy and unwell, or they're concerned about them engaged in some form of activity that they consider antisocial. The next slide in comparison is what the police determine once they attend these files. So a little bit of difference of how it's reported and then what happens once police arrive. So a significant number is suspicious occurrences, and a lot of that ends up being reported to police for information's sake. So something has transpired that maybe is unusual, and we take the report on it, we look into it, but it may not be defined as a specific criminal activity. Traffic is another one of our big calls. And then again, you'll see some of the calls related to individuals. Check well-being, causing disturbance, a breach of the peace, noise. These have been an area which we've seen a lot of growth in terms of files. And as I'd mentioned previously, over the recent past, it's almost quadrupled in terms of what we had previous. Did I pop too far? Okay. Traffic safety, that's one of the tiers that is one of our provincial priorities, and it's also a topic that we get a lot of interest in the community. Our statistics from year to year are very similar. On average, we're attending approximately 64 reportable collisions a month. That has been fairly consistent. The other area that has increased, and in fact it's on the next slide, which I'll move to, is suspensions, 24-hour suspensions through alcohol and drug. We're seeing more drug than alcohol on the suspensions. So people have learned their lesson in terms of impaired driving by alcohol. We now have to learn the lesson on impaired driving because of drug. That is higher than it has been on any of our previous years. So the suspension rate is about the same, but it's changed from alcohol to drug-based. Current issues. COVID has impacted, as I said, every aspect of what we do, not only within policing, but how we are working, how we work within the detachment, as well as our enforcement activities. It's challenging taking care of ourselves with our own personal protective equipment, protecting the public, and then also doing the role of enforcement. The other challenge around that is the detachment. We're very closely working together, so we're trying to be creative around that. We've done some shifting scheduling, some alternates, lots of screens. We've got whiteboards in place as dividers, and they're being used for keeping on top of tasks as well, which is very entertaining. As you've seen through the presentation already, and it continues to be a trend, and we're seeing that in our media as well, is the number of individuals who are struggling in the community. We, on average, respond to 400 Mental Health Act files a month. So in order to get a Mental Health Act designation within our files, that's not applied lightly. There has to be some information that's provided along to the police officers during the time that they're responding to the call, that this is a specific component of the investigation that they're dealing with. So perhaps the individual themselves discloses that they're dealing with a mental health issue, their family member does, through the circumstances of the file, that mental health is a contributor to the file. And that is obviously a significant concern in terms of the struggles that people in our community are experiencing. For the public and your awareness, our police officers are continually receiving ongoing education in de-escalation, in addressing people who are experiencing health challenges and how best to work with them. The detachment has also implemented, and I'll be bringing it up in a minute, but it's appropriate now to mention our mental health liaison officer as well, and some of the initiatives around that. But that has been significant pressure. One of the other areas that Nanaimo has been putting a lot of investigative effort is into investigating and putting forward our reports to Crown Council in terms of individuals who are engaged in child pornography, making and distributing of it. Through our partners with Crown Council, we've seen some very successful prosecutions, but that continues to grow. And the challenge with that type of file is the long-term impact it has on its victims and the need of the police officers to have exposure to the content and determine if people are actively being hurt or if it's the distribution of old images. So there is a very pressing need when they're doing the investigation to move through it as hastily as they can, while obviously keeping the very high levels of investigation going. We're seeing more and more devices involved in these crimes, which is increasing the workload. as I said, we've had some very positive court responses, and we've been in strong partnership with our Crown Counsel in that area. And I know that I'm speaking to the public as well at this, and it's so important that we be aware of our children's activities and their engagement online and in their communities and who they are with. Vulnerably housed takes up a significant portion of our members' time in the community, as well as in terms of our planning and response, as you're all aware of through the Health and Housing Task Force, with which we are a partner. One of the other areas that is a pressure in terms of the detachment is the Crown MOU and our disclosure requirements. So breaking this down into kind of everyday language, and I went and made sure that I was trying to represent this accurately. The Crown MOU on disclosure, it's bound by case law, and it's a contract between the province, the police, Crown Counsel, and the Defense Counsel on the presentation and business rules of our investigative reports that go forward to the Crown Counsel and then are shared with Defense Counsel. These investigations must be developed in a way that complies with all of the business rules so that these files can be disclosed in the same manner every time, regardless of the file. And these huge data, what's the word I'm looking for? The file is created and then the data is put into the Crown Counsel, and it's uploaded in a way that makes it searchable, indexable, and allows both the defense and Crown to use that information in an efficient manner for prosecution. One of our recent investigations had 35,000 pages and 10,000 documents within it in terms of prosecution. So when we speak of the amount of time it takes in court, the disclosure process is there to try and make that as efficient as possible, but it is just overwhelming the amount of time and energy it takes. And that is one of the areas that, as police officers, it's a significant change. I've got 28 years service. When I started, we didn't have a computer. We had a typewriter and a receptionist who helped us make it look pretty. And our serious investigations were banker boxes that were organized in a very systematic file. We've gone a long way from that to CDs, which is my understanding in some of our very significant files not that long ago in history. You got one CD and the defense got the other CD and one went to Crown. And we've moved so significantly in such a short period of time in that area. But it is very onerous on the preparation, but the outcome is completely supported. So, speaking to our partners in our initiatives, we spoke briefly about the Health and Housing Task Force. That's closely related as well to the situation table, with which Ms. Sheila Malcolmson, our member of Legislative Authority, spoke on. And I want to tie that in with Constable Waltman, who's highlighted there in red with the Mental Health Liaison Officer. We see these three items coming together closely as we move forward in addressing the challenges around mental health that we're seeing in our community. The reason it's red is that is one of the positions that you funded last year. And so I thought it was important in this presentation to highlight what we're doing with the position you gave us. Constable Waltman, we're very fortunate to have him at our detachment. He's been here a short period of time, but he comes from Surrey, where he worked right in their heart of their downtown core with the vulnerably housed group and the associated challenges around that with mental health and the situation tables. So he's well placed to help us move forward in this. Our other two large partner groups, the School Liaison Program led by Corporal Rose, and our Indigenous policing partners with Constable Big and Constable Mange. Lastly, the Community Response Unit is the other two positions that you funded last year as additional positions. And the purpose of this criminal response unit is a nimble and flexible targeted enforcement team to try and improve our communities and reduce the repeat offenders through integrated offender management programs. And that program is just up and running now. With COVID, it's been challenging to get additional staff members into the detachment as the training facilities were closed for a period of time during the second wave. And lastly, when I speak of partners, it's the partnership that our detachment has with yourselves. We've worked very closely through this COVID era with a direct dialogue and very open communication, and that's been integral in what we're doing. And I think we will continue to obviously have strong active participation with the city in the various community initiatives that we have. And I also wanted to showcase that the members of our detachment are involved as partners throughout the community in a variety of ways. Not only what we're doing officially at work, but the activities that we're involved in outside of work. The number of coaches that we have at the detachment is unbelievable. They're engaged from the little guys right up through to very advanced sport levels. Celebrations, we put on one this summer for a vet who was turning 100 years and the family was isolated as a result. And so we were able to recognize him in a safe way. The community volunteers that we have are multimedia communications. The list just goes on, and I couldn't be prouder of the people at our detachment and their engagement. And I wanted to highlight some of the things that they've been involved in. And that concludes my presentation, unless you have questions.
Inspector Fletcher, thank you very much. In order, Councillors Bonner, Turley, and Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you too, Inspector. Thank you very much for your report. Can I go back through a couple of slides and ask questions on them? Specifically, I'm looking at the one titled Third Quarter.
Yep.
And I kind of missed the part where you said decrease from an increased volume. Could you go over those again for me?
May I ask you to repeat it?
The decrease from 2019, I didn't get exactly what was decreased.
Our overall file load has decreased. The third quarter of this year to the third quarter of 2019 is 13% lower than it was last year.
Okay, and the increase in volume?
We are seeing the volume increase from where it was in the second quarter. The second quarter, our file volume dropped significantly. Just as everything got quiet while everyone was sequestering at home, it was a very large drop in our file load. We're getting much closer to normal now, and the metrics look very similar. They're just slightly lower than what they were.
So, I mean, and the reason I'm asking is we're hearing already on Facebook that Victoria has announced that their crime has gone significantly up. Mm-hmm. But I'm seeing here it's actually gone down.
Our volume's lower. We're busy with some other things. We've definitely seen that. So where we've seen, for example, the property offenses, we've seen a reduction in those calls, but we're seeing more persons files. So traffic accidents have decreased right now, which is a very good thing. We've had some very unfortunate collisions in the recent past.
Okay. The next one is police files. It's a couple down. Mm-hmm. Are any of these calls, can they be done by somebody else other than police? And the reason I'm asking, we've heard many times that such and such a thing is not a criminal act, mm-hmm. or mental health is not a police issue. And I completely understand it. So I'm trying to figure out if that's the case, then maybe some of these need to be done by somebody else. And that would be our responsibility to figure that out, I'm guessing.
I would say that some can, without a doubt. The piece that we have been challenged with, and the public perception around it has also been discussed at great length, is when we're dispatched to something, generally the information we have is limited, and we don't know what we have until we're there. And something that can be initially described as quite benign can become quite dynamic, and vice versa. And it's that risk to that scenario and who responds and how fast we can have additional resources if the incident becomes more aggressive or violent. So without a doubt, I do believe there's room for other community partners. It's just that assessment, and I don't have a firm answer on how we would do that exactly, but I think partnership is a strong possibility in some of those areas.
Thank you for that. The next one is current issues. And you mentioned here there's Mental Health Act files of 400 per month. How does a call happen that it becomes that? Like, how are you called to such a thing? There's probably 1,000 different examples, or at least 400 a month, but is there some generalities?
The routine call that we got more frequently years ago would be something along the lines of, my family member has been diagnosed with depression, schizophrenia, something along that line. They're struggling. I need to get them to the hospital. They're refusing to go. The family member would describe some of the characteristics or symptoms that the person was experiencing and how they were behaving, and it would meet the criteria under the Mental Health Act for the person to be apprehended for the safety of them or themselves, to be taken to the hospital for assessment by a physician. So that is a true definition of a Mental Health Act file. But we will also, now with more and more people living vulnerably, experience people who are acting in a manner that draws attention to them. We go and we're either trying to determine if it's a substance-related influence, or is there something else in the health realm that's going on. In terms of a Mental Health Act file, it has to be information that's received either through the police officer investigating or through other individuals or themselves that lead us to believe that, and it has to be a component of the call. So there's lots of times we all have circumstances where mental health may be a factor for us, but it doesn't impact our daily activities, and it would never be a component of the file. It has to be an element of something that is going on within the circumstances that brought the police there in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. My final question, if I may. On the council, in working with the RCMP, approved policy priorities, policing priorities for 2019 and 2020, and that include, and in not in any particular order, crime reduction, Indigenous policing services, mental health, road safety, and violence in relationships. And these are just our suggestions. Obviously, you figure out your own priorities and you move forward with them. Like, has that helped make the situation better of us setting those priorities for you for the last year?
How we apply it is through different operational initiatives within the detachment to try and address or positively influence those priorities. And as I said, we're also given some guidance and direction as a federal organization as priorities across Canada as well. So we are a partner in our community, and your input is important.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Inspector Fletcher, I only have one question.
Bless you. Bless you.
And that is, you mentioned under impaired driving, the incidences of alcohol being the prime cause of it has reduced to that of drugs. And I'm curious as to what drug is kind of the prominent one causing the impairment, or is it a whole host of different types?
A specific drug, is that what you're asking? I'm sorry, I don't have that information in the stats. It is whether it was considered alcohol or impaired by drug. we do see more and more people who are drivers admitting to having consumed cannabis. So that would be a speculation on my part, but that has been what we've heard.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, and through you to Inspector Fletcher. We quite often get complaints from lots of citizens that they're watching open drug use happen where people are using. Can you explain why the RCMP is not taking a lot of enforcement action on that, please?
Yeah, we've been, there is federal direction in terms of the emphasis on dealing and the production of drugs versus the individual use. Individual use of drugs is considered a health matter more than a criminal matter, and the emphasis is not on criminalizing individuals who are experiencing health-related addiction.
So that came out from the Director of Public Prosecutions, is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you. And my final question, going to the child porn making and distributing, from my days, it's always been extremely high in Nanaimo. Does that number still quite high? A lot of investigations and requiring a lot of time, plus mental health wellness for your members that are doing these?
Very much so. For reasons I'm not clear on, we've reached a 5-year high in terms of the number of files that we have involving child pornography, and it's just heart-wrenching. For the individuals at the center of it are innocents, and then the impact that it has on the entire community as it goes through.
Thank you very much, and to your members, thank you very much for working through all this. And I witnessed some very professional members dealing with some street people throwing knives at each other, and just, they handled it very well, and I heard that from other people as well, so thank you.
Thank you. That sounds interesting.
Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Quickly through you to Inspector Fletcher. Thanks for being here today. I think and I hope that most of our Nanaimo citizens, as do members of council, appreciate sincerely the work of our local police force, a very tough job. But I also know that a number of our citizens would like to be able to support the police in some way, maybe by being eyes or ears in the community and programs such as Block Watch. Are there opportunities for people to get involved, and if so, how can they approach you?
Absolutely. This year we have the pleasure of welcoming Ms. Christy Woods, who took over from Mr. Dave Couson in our community policing office. Ms. Woods has been working very hard to continue to grow our community policing volunteers, and that's a really vibrant program that we're very proud of in terms of the work that they're doing. And they are vested citizens. As someone said earlier, they aren't residents. They're actively involved and engaged and participating in community patrols, traffic initiatives with the speed boards, and they're a very vibrant part of our detachment, and it's a pleasure having them there. And people are free to reach out through Ms. Woods and become engaged through that program. She's actively working. I think she said we have 7 to 10 patrols on average a week of community citizens involved and actively reporting back to the detachment things that they see that might be concerning or of interest. So it's very appropriate work, and we're very proud to have them with us.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, am I correct that what used to be the Neighborhood Watch program is now Block Watch? Is that correct? And is that still operating?
Yes, it is. And Gary O'Brien, who is our media relations officer, is deeply involved with that. And I'm trying to think of on average, I would say he's probably meeting with a community 3 to 4 times a month as they begin their program and start up the initiative, and it's very well received. And again, that type of program is just people in their community being interested in their neighbors and looking out for each other.
Yes, very worthwhile. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Inspector Fletcher, thank you very much. Much
Thank you for
appreciated.
having
I
me today.
suspect the community will be quite intrigued by the statistics that they've come across. And yes, Ms. Gurry, I've noted the time. And given that the agenda is relatively substantial still, I'm going to suggest we do take a 10-minute recess.
Our emergency routes, they are priority routes. They consist of roads that go to and from the hospitals, from the fire department stations, and from the BC ambulance stations. They're also their main commerce routes through the city of Nanaimo. So this allows commerce to happen during a snow event. So we hit those roads first. Once those are clear and open, then we move into the secondary roads, and then we move into the residential areas, which are dead-end roads and cul-de-sacs. And it can take up to 96 hours before we get into the residential areas. One of the side effects of plowing snow is it does end up on the sidewalk, and this can be very frustrating for homeowners and business owners that have just cleaned the sidewalk. It also pulls into their driveways. The crews try to keep it as close to the curb as they can, but we need to open the road right up to the curb to allow the drains to be exposed for when the snow starts to melt.
So this is one of our larger winter maintenance vehicles. They're very versatile in that they can be equipped with a lot of our different pieces of equipment. Right now this one has a front plow, a belly plow, as well as a salter or spreader box. We also have a brine unit that fits into this vehicle. This is the belly plow, and it's really good at removing hard-packed snow and ice. And then back up here to the front, we have what everyone is more familiar with. This front plow can push a lot of snow, so make sure that you slow down and keep your distance from the vehicles to ensure safety.
We have 17 vehicles that we use within the snow and ice operations for the city of Nanaimo. We also have an early shift that starts at 5 in the morning, and we have a night patrol, an afternoon shift, and an evening shift. They are eyes on the road, keeping us appraised of the conditions so that when the snow starts falling or ice starts forming on the roads, they can start salting and also call for other resources and mobilize the crews out.
This is one of the City of Nanaimo Public Works snow and ice control vehicles, and this is actually set up for a brining unit right now, or anti-icing. And what brine is a 23.3% sodium chloride solution, and it comes out of the spray bars down here at the bottom, and it's made here at the Public Works yard. It's a proactive method of snow and ice control, as when we know that there's a winter storm coming, we can actually lay this down on the road prior to the event.
By putting the brine down before the snow comes, it buys time. It lets us get on the roads, and then when we hit it with the plows, it doesn't stick. The snow doesn't stick, it comes off much easier. Whereas if we didn't brine, the snow has an opportunity to freeze to the road.
So another benefit of the brining or anti-icing unit is that during the frosty mornings, we can have it drive down the road, and then immediately the frost disappears as they're applying the brine.
Brine's a great tool for us. It's very cost effective. We can stretch our hard-pressed tax dollars to the maximum. We can make brine for cents on the dollar.
So the other thing that we ask is that everyone stays back from these anti-icing or any winter maintenance vehicles, as they have limited visibility and it's poor conditions out there, and they're trying to maneuver around everything. So just stay back and give them a little bit of room to operate and clear the roads.
So here we are in the Public Works Yard, City of Nanaimo, and what you look around, you can see our various tools that we use for snow and ice fighting. We have tandem trucks, 4x4 trucks. We have backhoes. All our trucks are capable of having front plows on them. And the larger trucks, we have belly plows on them as well. And they all have a salter sander that can be mounted on the back.
This is another tool in our winter maintenance fleet. It's a salting machine. And what happens is that the salt gets loaded into this hopper, and on this conveyor where it gets hit with these two saddle tanks, which are full of brine. Then it comes out here on the spreader. And why we add the brine is that it reduces the amount of spray from the salt, so it doesn't bounce nearly as far, saving about 20 to 30% of our salt. As well, by using the anti-icing liquid on the salt, the activation starts right as it hits the road.
The purpose of the salt is to keep the roads bare, keep ice from forming on the road. Again, safety for everyone, including ourselves and the public. That's why we put the salt down.
Today we're talking about clearing catch basins or road drains on residential roads. The first thing to understand is where the catch basin is in proximity to your residence. When clearing a catch basin or road drain, we want to make sure that you make yourself visible and aware of oncoming traffic. When clearing snow or debris from a catch basin, we ask that you put it in an area where it will not plug the catch basin again, not placing it on an already shoveled driveway or sidewalk. Sandbags are available at 2020 Labio Road 24/7. Just remember to make sure you bring a shovel. The City of Nanaimo and Public Works appreciate your help in keeping your catch basins clear. Thank you.
On snow days like this, the city of Nanaimo sends out a fleet of plows. How well equipped are these trucks?
They're really well equipped. They all have plows and sanders on them. We come with a belly plow too, so we're well prepared once we get a big snow like this. A lot of waves, a lot of friendly faces. People are pretty happy when you come and rescue them and clear off their road. So on our maps to determine where we go, we follow our red routes, which are our bus routes and our major routes, and they're first. Then our secondary routes are in purple, followed lastly by our side streets, which are in yellow. We try not to cover a nicely shoveled driveway, but sometimes we don't really have an option, and it's unfortunate. We're not trying to do it on purpose.
In some cases, the plows can't scrape heavily packed or iced snow right down to the surface of the pavement. So how does it clear away?
We're taking off as much as we can, and then we're putting lots of salt down to melt the rest. So sometimes it just takes a little bit longer, but it's usually pretty effective. Salting is really important because if we get it down like this, then roads won't freeze, and way safer for the drivers out there.
And in terms of safety and getting the job done, are there some challenges to plowing in Nanaimo?
Yeah, Nanaimo's got a lot of hills, a lot of narrow streets, cars parked on it. It can be pretty tough sometimes.
How can drivers park on the road in Nanaimo?
Just make sure they're parked legally, and as close to the curb as possible so we can find the streets as much as we can. We don't always move very fast, but that's important to push the snow. We really appreciate if people can give us a little bit of space. These are big trucks. We have salters going, spinning, and we're still on a lot of ice and snow, so when we try to go up a hill, if people are right behind us, it can be dangerous for everybody. So we appreciate it. Everybody can give us some space behind us, and we'll give out some space in front.
Tiana. Hey. It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it.
Committee minutes. Those are just for receipt, and the motion for adoption of consent items. I understand, Councillor Bonner, you wish to withdraw 10B4. So a motion for adoption of the consent items with that exception. Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The asset management update. Would someone like to move that? And then Councillor Bonner can He'll move it so he can vote against it. We can have Councillor Brown seconding it. All those in favor and contrary? Councillor Bonner, noted, is opposed to the asset management extending the annual 1% property tax increase. Correct? We're all clear? Good. Thank you. Motion to approve extending the annual 2.5% water user fee increase. Moved Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that we now have a motion to move Councillor Armstrong's motion respecting traffic residential street parking up to follow Mr. Weber's presentation as a delegation under 11, and that will allow a very patient citizen to go home before it's too late. In the old days when I was young, I would say I had a date with Uncle Nolte at 10 o'clock and I didn't like to miss it. Is there a mover? Councillor Armstrong? Councillor Hemmons is seconding. All those in favor, motion carries. Thank you very much. The next, I'd like to welcome Mr. Guire Weber, Vancouver Island Rail Transit. And I must say, notwithstanding the views of some in the world, a delegation I'm very happy to welcome to council.
Thank you.
And thank you for being patient tonight.
No worries, I'll make this short. How's that? That's good? Good.
Don't be shy about speaking up.
I'll try not to yell too much. So. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Is this on? There's a couple of slides to my right. Oh. All right, looks good. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Vancouver Island Rail Transit would connect communities on Vancouver Island, starting with an intercity rail on the ENN. Originally, the idea was to build a commuter rail service within the CRD and then expand rail service north to Courtenay. However, the cost of the 16-kilometer commuter rail service would be higher than the intercity rail service for the entire 289-kilometer rail line. The cost of the intercity rail would be between $1.7 and $2.2 million per kilometer. To put this in perspective, the canceled Surrey, Newton, Guildford LRT was estimated at $157 million per kilometer. Intercity rail would not be a replacement for transit buses, such as the Nanaimo to Parksville and the Cowichan commuter service. Buses are great for local service and to the next community, but an intercity train would be better at connecting all the communities along the corridor. Having a station on Johnson Street between Government and Douglas, Government and Douglas would give direct access to the downtown Victoria Core. Starting off with 4 trains would allow a run from Courtenay to Victoria and return, Port Alberni and Victoria and return, Victoria to Courtenay and return, and Victoria to Port Alberni and return. It would allow passengers to travel to a destination along the corridor, spend a few hours, and be able to return on the same day. When ridership increases, then the frequency of the trains would increase. Battery electric multiple units are basically electric multiple units for operations on non-electrified rail lines. Charge points would be at specific stations so the train can run the entire length. A recent study from Germany shows battery-operated trains would be up to 35% cheaper than a hydrogen fuel cell train, taking into account the purchase, operated, and maintenance for 30 years. A recently awarded contract between the German Transport Authority and Stadler provided 30 years of maintenance as well as supplying the BEMUs. Battery-powered rail vehicles would follow the federal and provincial government's green initiative, so hopefully the Island Rail Corridor Foundation could apply for one of the infrastructure grants to upgrade the rail line. As well, see if Via Rail would cover the annual cost of operating the 4 trains, as Via Rail was providing passenger rail service in the past. Green technologies such as battery electric multiple units would follow the Climate Action Plan, and I would hope the Council would support the idea. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber.
Forgot one last thing, Johnson Street. Anyways, thank you.
Do we have questions from council members? I know it's late, but I just want to extend to you my very sincere thanks for your patience tonight. I don't speak for council when I say this, but I am an enormous fan and supporter of the work of the Island Corridor Foundation and the maintenance of rail up and down Vancouver Island. I think it is with great regret, I suspect, over time, the good citizens of Victoria will look back at the abandonment of rail lines historically. Converting them to trails is wonderful, and it's great for cyclists. But all of those former lines provide, I think, transportation for the future in terms of moving people in large numbers. So continue the good work, and thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
We're now going to deal with Councillor Armstrong's motion, and as I understand the motion, we'll welcome Ms. Barr to speak as a delegation, and then we can deal with the motion in the regular course of the evening. Ms. Barr, you have welcome. If you could state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes. I didn't bother to mention that.
I'm sorry,
to
you
Mr.
said
Weber.
what? State my...
If you could state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Okay.
The light will go green when I set you off, and when you've had a minute left, it'll turn orange.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name's Susan Barr. I live in apartment 305 at 451 Selby Street. Okay, Your Worship, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here today on behalf of the tenants of 451 Selby Street. Our building has 72 units with 10 tenant parking spaces. I originally had thought that the Council of the Day had granted a parking variance, but I couldn't confirm that. I don't know what the Council of the Day had in mind 40 years ago for this seniors building, but I do know that 10 spaces is not enough. Today, owning a car is a necessity for many of us, and it ensures that we can maintain a good quality of life and retain our independence. The requirement of having to go out to move our vehicles every 24 hours does nothing to enhance our quality of life. We respectfully request that the city change the parking bylaw to state, in residential buildings where there's inadequate tenant parking, said tenants be granted unlimited street parking on the streets adjacent to their place of residence, provided their vehicle is duly licensed. These permits would be renewed annually. This should not be any more difficult to administer than the current 2-hour parking exemptions that we have now. Having to go out in all sorts of weather and move our vehicles is causing undue hardship for many. A number of people I represent have physical health problems, and a car for them is vital. Personally, 2 years ago, I severely injured my back digging my car out after a snowstorm and ended up with 8 trips to the chiropractor. Another of our tenants, who has COPD and was undergoing chemotherapy at that time, also found it very taxing to have to go down and make that pilgrimage to move her car. Currently, we can't go out of town for any length of time to visit family or go on vacation because we can't leave our cars. When I talked to them at the parking office, they said, well, rent a space. Really? Where? And secondly, for low-income seniors, this is not a solution. One person intimated that as we are living in subsidized housing, we shouldn't expect more handouts from the city. What this person is saying, for people in the lower income strata, we should be grateful for what we have and not expect anything. This attitude is highly discriminatory towards low-income people of all ages. My rent is $800 a month for approximately 400 square feet. I'm not sure how subsidized that is, but I do know I pay my share of taxes through my rent. Finally, to make matters worse, in 2017, the city granted a 10 parking space variance to the hotel across the street. Along with a 10-year tax exemption subsidy. Along with the municipal buildings on the street, this will make future parking even more difficult. Again, I respectfully ask that you grant us unlimited parking on the 400 blocks of Selby Street and Prideaux. Our building covers both blocks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. You have 4 minutes. You're even ahead of
I
schedule.
tried to make it quick.
Councillors Gesselbrock and then Martman in order, please.
Thank you, Worship. Ms. Barr, I'd just like to say thank you for coming to speak to council, and I did overhear you saying that it is your birthday today.
Yeah, not quite the way I wanted to spend my birthday.
And
this meeting and a hospital meeting before this.
wow. On behalf of council, I would like you to wish you a very happy birthday and thank you for your commitment to your city and advocating for your residents there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Councillor Martman.
Pardon me.
Thank you.
Sorry. Tired.
And thank you and happy birthday as well. You were saying you're representing the tenants. Do you know approximately how many of the tenants do have vehicles?
Yes, well, the 10 that won the lottery and got the parking, but there are approximately, I believe, somewhere between 12 and 14 of us that are still parking on the street. The numbers go up and down depending on whether, people moving in. When I first took account, there were 18 that were still parking on the street. However, I think that number's gone down because a few people have passed away.
Okay, so it's not substantial. We don't need it for the whole 72?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barr, and I appreciate you staying tonight, particularly on your birthday, but you'll be a pretty unique person and I will be able to say you spent this particular birthday speaking to council. That's maybe
right.
not on your bucket list, but it gives you unique status.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to reports. A is off. We have the covenant amendment application number CA 13-1601070, 1074, and 1098 Douglas Avenue and 280 10th Street. The patient, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're here this evening seeking council's direction to proceed with an amendment to a Section 219 covenant on the subject property. And this item was recently before you, I believe, at your last council meeting where we provided an update on this and a summary on this amendment. Since that time, staff have undertaken the required notification I'm not aware of any response to that notification to the neighboring properties, and we're back this evening to seek council's final decision on this matter.
Thank you very much. Someone care to make the motion? Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next, Mr. Lindsay again, it's the appointment of a bylaw enforcement officer. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Worship. We're here this evening to seek council's direction with the appointment of Terry Knowles as a bylaw enforcement officer under our the City of Nanaimo bylaw enforcement bylaw. It requires that these person hired in this role be appointed by council, and this would give them the authority to do items such as write tickets and enter property as per the authorities granted by the legislation.
Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you very much. Motion carries. The next is proposed council procedure bylaw amendments. Very timely, Ms. Gurry. Please.
Thank you, Worship. So the report in front of you today is an amendment to Council's procedure bylaw with a clerical change to make a complete sentence. There was a word missing in a sentence, as well as change the public hearing nights from the first week of the month to the third Thursday. So from the first Thursday of the month to the third Thursday of the month. And the reason for this, and you passed a motion back in June of this year for the remainder of 2020 to change the date for the public hearing to the third Thursday. And it was because of COVID, and our newspaper publication has changed its amount of time that it publicizes. So in order to provide proper notification and to speed up the development process as much as we can, not slow that down, we made the change, and council approved the change to the third Thursday night of the month. However, going forward, and once the ministerial orders are no longer in effect, and when the state of public health emergency is over for the province, we will need to act in accordance with our bylaw, and therefore we need that changed in the procedural bylaw. And then the next report goes with this one, where if council approves this change, the Board of Variance date is also the third Thursday of the month, and for staffing overlap, the same staff need the time to do the public hearings. That report follows this one. The other change is timely, as you said, Your Worship, as the motion that was just made to move the delegation forward required a motion with a majority of council present. Passing that motion, the proposed amendment that I briefly made when we discussed the procedure bylaw last month, but now it's more formally proposed in this amendment, and that is that you or I, the corporate officer or the mayor, can change the order of business and or delete headings that aren't needed in order to streamline the process of the meetings.
So this is better known as the mayor's dictator.
Or me.
I like both suggestions. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to move the Council Procedure Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2020, number 7272.02, to update processes regarding the public hearing date and streamlining the method to reorder the agenda, pass first reading.
Seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Councillor Brown again, please.
I'd move that Council Procedure Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2020, number 7272.02, pass second reading.
Seconded Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
I'd move that Council Procedure Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2020, number 7272.02, pass third reading.
Seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Board of Variance Amendment Bylaw change in monthly meeting day. Ms. Gurry, please.
Thank you, Worship. So as I noted, as you have proceeded with changing the public hearing date to the third Thursday, we now wish to change the Board of Variance from the third Thursday to the first Thursday. So basically, these meetings are just switching their positions, and it's due to publication reasons and staffing overlap, as staff are needed at both of these meetings, and it's hard to do it on the same evening. So for those reasons, we need to change this bylaw, amend this bylaw to reflect those meeting dates.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Your Worship, I would move that the Board of Variance Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 7213.01 to change the meeting day from the third Thursday of each month to the first Thursday of each month pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
I'd move that the Board of Variance Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 7213.01 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
I'd move that the Board of Variance Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 7213.01 pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next is the 2021 Acting Mayor Schedule. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is a requirement of the community charter that annually a calendar be prepared that puts one of the members of council in place to act as the mayor during the mayor's absence, or in place of the mayor should the mayor not be able to attend or act for the mayor in those instances. So before you is two options. It's the same calendar as last year as one of your options, and the second is what we had done last year, which is just a random calculation. We put all your names into a hat basically, and it spits out the time frame for you all to act as acting mayor. So there's the first option and the second option. Should council wish to go with the same calendar that you have this year currently and just roll that over into next year, there is always the option for council to make adjustments should any councillors want to switch their time frames, etc., as long as we have it in place by the end of the year. And then going forward next year, should any changes come up by a motion of council, it could be changed and adjusted as well.
Well, I get to be mayor all the time, so I am indifferent to this. So, council, tell me what you want to do. Councillor Armstrong.
I'd like to move option 1 with the amendment that Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Turley switch spots with his agreement.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? This is very controversial. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. The next is 2021 appointments to the Regional District of Nanaimo Board. Ms. Gurry, please.
Thank you, Worship. So this is an annual report that comes before you as well, and it's regarding your appointments to the Regional District of Nanaimo Board. The Regional District of Nanaimo requires 8 members of council sit on their board with 1 alternate. You have a policy in place that puts those positions based on experience and voter confidence, and so we are recommending the same as you have had last year and in 2018, unless you have different direction.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I would move the recommendation unless we were thinking of maybe dropping the top guy off and give Councillor Martman a shot at it. But failing that, I do have a question though regarding our policy, and having been a councillor watcher prior to my current position, I've seen that particular piece of policy misused and abused and ignored. And then there isn't really any clear definition of what it actually means anyway. So I'm wondering if in the future we couldn't just, if we're going to go with the way we have in the past of, mayor and then the top vote getters, then we should just say that's what it's going to be. Because there's so many definitions of what voter confidence is, and like sometimes depending on what time of the year it is, we have less voter confidence than anybody. But
I'm looking for a seconder now too.
Okay.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any further discussion on this?
Only that I would like to see that we maybe finalize that sometime in a future date.
I think that's a very interesting suggestion, and I must say, in response to your suggestion, cheeky as it was, dropping the big guy off, which I know was cheeky, I sincerely hope in the United States of America that does happen tomorrow. But having said that, in terms of voter confidence, that's the great thing about our system. I don't know that we have another choice, but on the other hand, there may well be personal reasons for a councillor not to wish to be part of that on an annual basis. I think all of us have faced, well, many of us have faced challenges around this table for various reasons and might not wish to sit on the regional district. And so rather than fix it, I'm quite happy. No disrespect to the chair of the regional board sitting on my immediate left, who conducts fabulous meetings. But having said that, unless there's further discussion, Councillor Thorpe, you wish to say something?
Yeah, no, actually I do, Your Worship. Before we get to future items where I might not agree with Councillor Bonner, I want to hasten to agree with him on this point, because I think the wording that is a concern to me is experience and voter confidence. And I recall a situation during last term when we had to replace a representative to the RDN, and there was a quite heated debate over how much voter confidence counted as opposed to another councillor's long-term experience. So I think it's a legitimate question, and maybe that wording just needs to be tidied up as Councillor Bonner suggests. But in the meantime, I will support the recommendation.
Miracles never cease. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to add that possibly that is a policy we could bring forward. That wording is vague, but my understanding of the history of it, not speaking of what happened during the last council term, is ultimately it was the mayor's decision why this was put into a policy type form. That's something that could be discussed, and we could bring the policy forward for that discussion and at least make it more clear.
I might say before I call the vote, as much as that's appealing to my small dictatorial side, I'm also reminded of the fact that that essentially means the voting decisions, which are somewhat respected by our current system, of thousands of people who vote in Nanaimo, would be subject to disrespect, if I may phrase it that way, by a mayor and or the 9 people around this table. So I just leave that out as food for thought as we consider this policy down the road. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is bylaws. Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 4500.179. Councillor Brown.
Your Worship, I would move that Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 4500.179 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? No, pardon me, it's past third reading.
Oh, yeah, Your Worship, sorry about that. Yes, there's a third reading and then adoption.
Yes.
Oh, my apologies. I would, so I guess I would rescind that.
Repeat it. Go ahead.
Okay.
Let's hear the whole thing.
All right.
We love hearing your dulcet tones.
I would move that Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 4500.179 to replace the violation and penalty section and delete the fine schedule past third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
And I would move again that Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 4500.179 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Management and Protection of Trees Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 7126.01. Councillor Brown.
I would move that the Management and Protection of Trees Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 7126.01 to replace the violation and penalty section and delete the fine schedule be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 7159.08. Councillor Brown.
Your Worship, I would move that Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 7159.08 to replace the fine schedule for the Zoning Amendment Bylaw, add a fine schedule for the Management of Trees Bylaw, and replace Schedule B Registry Agreement be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Bylaw status sheet is for information only, and item 14 is Councillor Gesselbrock's notice of motion riparian review.
Okay. Notice of motion that the city's regulatory framework for watercourses be revised as part of the Reimagine Nanaimo process in order to improve the protection of city watercourse riparian areas for the full range of the important environmental and community benefits they provide.
Nicely done. Thank you. No.
Oh, just to note, the rationale has been sent out. Okay.
And a reminder to read the rationale. Thank you very much, Councillor Gesselbrock. The next is other business. Councillor Bonner, motion re-free menstrual products in city facilities.
Before we carry on with this, I have a question regarding the presentation we had earlier on the mayor's task force.
Yes.
Do we receive that or anything, or was it just for entertainment purposes?
It's a report to council, no, and council will have to sit down at some point on agenda very soon, I hope. Then we'll decide whether we do something with that task force report, and I sincerely hope we will.
Okay, excellent. I'd like to bring a motion forward that council directs staff to prepare a report within 30 days outlining options to provide free menstrual products in city facilities in the spring of 2021, including a list of city facilities and the cost and feasibility to provide barrier-free menstrual product distribution at each location, and outline how the lessons learned from the pilot projects undertaken by the cities of Coquitlam, Port Moody, and Victoria in their civic facilities can benefit a similar program in Nanaimo, and evaluate partnership opportunities such as with the United Way's Period Promise campaign, and provide future recommendations to council as part of ongoing program sustainment.
Second, Councillor Martman. Councillor.
If I may.
Yes, you may.
Yeah. That's where things went off Wales last time with my motion. I didn't get to speak on it first. So, this came about through a committee, a group that I was asked to speak, or asked to review at the UBCM regarding motions and resolutions that were probably not going to make it to the floor. And when I found this one, the first thing out of my mind is, why is this even a resolution? Why are we not doing this already? So I started doing some research, and I found out that actually Victoria and Coquitlam are already doing this already. In the case of Victoria, the City Council talked about it for a little while, and then staff came back with without a motion, staff just came back with a recommendation on costs, and then they started the project. Same with Coquitlam, and then Port Moody has done by resolution, a motion to council to proceed there. I think this is timely, and I think it's important that these particular products are basic necessities that are required. We provide toilet paper and also hand washing products and paper towels, and there shouldn't be any reason why we're providing these. Presently, they are free in civic facilities, but it requires someone to walk up to a desk and ask for them. And since we don't dictate who works behind a desk, be they male or female, I would be loath to think that a 13-year-old young lady would come up and ask a male person working behind the desk for some of these products. I think it's very important that we get on board with other municipalities and proceed with this. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
I do have some reservations at the fact that it is already being done, but I'm going to wait to see what the report says, see what the costs are, et cetera, before finally make my final decision. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, yeah, I'm curious as well. I guess what I hesitated over was the wording of the motion. First of all, within 30 days sort of sprung out at me. We don't usually put a time limit on something unless it's really emergent, and our staff is very busy with a lot of other big files, so I wondered why that was there. And then outlining options to provide free menstrual products implies to me that we're going to do it. It's just a case of give us some options on how we're going to do it. Whereas I would prefer a report that says, could we, should we, what's it going to cost, how would it work? Maybe I'm just misreading the motion. Maybe Councillor Martman would like to respond to that.
Councillor Armstrong, you're back on the list. Did you know? All right.
Yes, Councillor Martin.
Well, you will get your turn in order here. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. God love you, Don, really. I support the motion. Just a quick call to a trustee today. I learned that menstrual products are provided free in all of our high schools and all of our elementary schools without a student going to the office. Dispensers are in the washrooms. I don't think this is going to be a high-cost item. I don't think we need the report in 30 days. I don't think this is emergent, but I'm definitely picking up what you're putting down. I think this is good stuff. Thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And I think for the costs, I really don't see us having much of an increase or anticipating one, but we already give it free now. What we're talking about is a different method of distribution with some dignity for women and for men, right? So this to me is a no-brainer. I agree with Councillor Bonner. I don't even know why in this day and age we have to have this motion to supply what is a necessary product. I'm curious though, through you to staff, is 30 days an issue?
Ms. Guri.
Thank you, Worship. I had put my request to speak on because when that was brought up, the 30 days by Councillor Thorpe, I had a look-see, and that's actually not going to be possible unless it came to the November 16th meeting, which is 2 weeks from this evening. And that's because there's no council meeting the last Monday of the month, the 5th Monday of the month, and the next one is until December 7th. So staff wouldn't actually be able to meet that deadline, and perhaps Mr. Harding could speak further to that, but I just wanted to actually make an adjustment or have Councillor Bonner make an adjustment to that date as well.
Councillor Bonner, are you going to propose an amendment to your own motion here?
I don't want anybody doubling over backwards on this one. My concern here was that it just didn't get into there because I know staff is working on other things. I would like to have this on board and working if everyone agrees to the report that comes out by the spring. And I do know that we're in budget deliberations. In my research, none of these have cost any more than like $25,000, $30,000 for an entire year. And that was including buying all the machinery as well. So I'm fine with by the end of the year or something like that. I just didn't want it to show up next July.
Might I suggest politely a reflection on the ability of our staff that you simply take out the 30 days period, that staff simply provide a report and that we can rely on them to do it in a timely manner. I'm seeing Mr. Harding nod. This hasn't been an emergent issue of great concern in the community in 2 years, and so I think that whether it's 30 days or 60 days is not going to be an insurmountable problem, but I just throw that out as a suggestion.
Quite willing to do that.
Is there agreement from the seconder as well?
Yes,
Thank you.
very good. All right, thank you. Back to Councillor Martman now. Do you wish to say more?
Good.
We're okay. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. Just a follow-up point to the dignity piece. I reacted to that because I think we should be able to ask for these things no matter what gender the other person is. And I think all of us women in the room would acknowledge, even if the dispenser isn't there, we would just ask every woman in the room. You know, like we have ways of doing this. I don't think it needs to be, particularly given that we know the school district where, you know, most young women are spending a lot of time, provide these for free. I've been in restaurants, and maybe it's not appropriate for civic facilities, so I've been in places where there's just either a basket of products, like we probably don't need to do reinforced things on a wall, or a simple poster saying, if you're in need of menstrual products, please see a female lifeguard. Like, I think there's options here that aren't going to cost thousands of dollars, that are going to solve this one particular thing that you're interested in solving, which I don't overall think is a massive issue. I think these are accessible and readily available for most women in the community. But I do agree, for those who maybe don't have the resources, this would be a good thing to do. But I would hate to see us kind of go into the stratosphere with it. I think there are really simple things we can do.
Councillor Bonner, did you want to say something else? No? Off the list?
I'm off the
Councillor
list,
Turley?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question, and I'm assuming staff will provide information on this, but would it be available like in the washroom here or at all facilities in the city, or is it just recreation facilities we're looking at? And I'm not asking for an answer now, but I think at some point.
I think Councillor Turley, Mr. Harding can provide us with some information that might be of assistance. Mr. Harding, thank you for being patient tonight.
So as interpreting the motion, we're assuming all city facilities, so this is city facilities, so is the Port Theatre, so is the Art Gallery, so is the museum, all the recreation facilities. What we will come back to is what Councillor Bonner means about outdoor facilities. So we've got 72 different outdoor washrooms. Does that include all of Westwood Lake? Those types. We'll come back with those, and council can choose how far out we want to provide this. We do have a lot of facilities. So my assumption is you're thinking like our rec facilities and facilities like this, and you're not thinking about Neck Point or Colliery Dams or things like that, but we'll bring those options too, and then council can determine. But we'll show all of our facilities.
Any further discussion on this? I'm going to weigh in because I just can't resist. Firstly, to chastise the suggestion that somehow young women in the modern age would be reluctant to ask for something which is as natural as toilet paper, to rely on the words of both Councillors Martman and Bonner, I think reflects a certain attitude about this, which doesn't jive with my modern thinking. The second thing is quite simply this. These products are available now at many of our facilities, not all, obviously, upon request. I saw Councillor Hemmond's eyes jump when the suggestion was $25,000 or $30,000 a year, and I don't mean to single her out, but certainly my best guesstimate was, before this came to council tonight, was that it might well be that amount of money. And I must say, as the former president of Planned Parenthood back in the 80s, when that wasn't a very popular organization either, if you want to talk about providing free products to the public in public facilities, I would strongly suggest we consider the provision of condoms to prevent the spread of venereal disease, to prevent unwanted pregnancies, which have far more disastrous impacts on public health and safety. This is an example, with great respect, and I am going to support, because I want to hear what the staff have to say. I'm going to vote for it. But this is one of those nice, oh yes, let's do it, it's a good idea kind of things, when we have so many incredibly pressing problems in this city, and this council wants to consider, let's just say it's $20,000. Spend that kind of money when we have 600 homeless people, when we don't provide free condoms, which I would suggest, with great respect, are a much more needed thing, and God knows sex is as natural a human function as defecation and urination and menstruation. So having said that, I think you know where I may well end up voting on this, but let's go ahead and let's have the report. But with all the things that we're being pressed upon in the coming year in terms of expenditure, when Mr. Sims is sitting back there worrying about where the next line's going to blow in our aging city infrastructure, and we're talking about spending money on something which has never once been raised to me in 18 years in the BC legislature and 2 years as mayor by anyone, is something that should be provided free in public facilities. I just have to say, this is not great respect, a pressing matter. I'm sorry, Councillor Bonner, I'll be happy to hear from him, and then we'll have the vote.
Thank you. If we can compare something that women require on a monthly basis to a condom, that's fine. That's your decision, right? But in terms of the legislature, in terms of the legislature, I think this was brought up because all of our school districts now provide these free, and that was a provincial edict through the Ministry of Education. So it must have come up. I'm guessing you were away that day, but I think it is important, and this is just one of the things that we should be provided. The point you raised, though, is like, should we be doing these other things? Absolutely, right? But this council was elected to govern this city. And that doesn't mean we only do one thing. We do a whole bunch of things. Because we're going to be chastised for putting in bike lanes when we have homeless people. All of these things, right? So the issue is, we are a council that governs the city, and this came up as what I think is an important issue because it's not being done, and that's why it's in front of the council today. So thank you very much for your support, sir. I will end my conversation now.
And let me just say, I look forward to receiving from every member of council, because that's what's important. No one approached me in the BC legislature as their MLA and said, let's have menstrual products provided free in the school system. I look forward to every member of council being able to address this matter when it's raised, not what they hear after tonight's debate, but whether anyone has come to them and asked that the city provide free menstrual products in all public facilities. That's what I'm interested in hearing. Councillor Armstrong.
I will tell you on Facebook that there's 89 opposed and 2 for, so it's not a high priority, it's actually, but just for Councillor Hemmons in Port Mooney or Coquitlam, sorry, just for 5 facilities was $20,000. What's in their report? Just for 5, and we're looking at 70, so there you go.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Well, from menstruation to traffic and parking. Councillor Armstrong, please.
The council directs staff to prepare a report outlining options for council to consider in order to permit residents to park on residential streets for more than 24 hours, and if seconded, I'd like to speak to it.
Speak to it.
Yes, as Ms. Barr said, I've been in this discussion with some of the seniors there for the past year or so, and when this came forward to us, I voted against the place only having to provide 13 parking spots when there's 70 residences. There's an assumption that because people are poor, they don't have cars, which is inaccurate. There's also an assumption that seniors don't have cars, which is the biggest inaccuracy, because for most of them, they don't take the bus because they don't feel safe, or they've got injuries that don't allow them, so their car is their lifeline. And they don't have a lot of money, but their car is 20 maybe years old, 30 years old. So this is not a motion for those that have garages, have driveways. This motion is in for whoever's going to do the report. I'm more concerned with the fact about those that don't have garages and don't have driveways, or in this particular case, the people living in a residence that don't have the ability to park in there because they didn't win the lottery to get those. So that's what I'm looking at. Councillor Bonner had a great idea about a permit process where, you know, if you live in a house that doesn't have a garage or doesn't have a thing, you can apply for a permit. 1 permit per household. So there's lots of options, I think, that are out there. Victoria does this, where there's, I think, is 72 hours or whatever. I'm in not a big hurry for it, because I understand there is a review coming down, so, but it's been something that they've been asking for, to look at that for the areas that don't have the ability to park at their homes. We always say when we give these variances, oh, well, they can park on the street. We hear that all the time. We hear that when the developers come on, there's on-site park or on-street parking. But 2 hours isn't long enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turling.
Yes, Your Worship. It's a question I would have through staff, and I don't know if it's appropriate now or at some time soon. There's already a provision on some streets for residents-only parking, and my question is, how long are residents allowed to park there on those streets? I believe Milton Street is one of them. Is there a limited time, or is it 24 hours?
Yes, Your Worship. There is 2-hour parking noted on a lot of the downtown streets, and residents that do park there are allowed to get a parking permit from the city that says residents exempt. So residents are exempt from 2 hours. However, our bylaw, traffic and highway bylaw, does, when you park on the street, you have to move your car every 24 hours. So I think that's the problem that was identified by the delegation and Councillor Armstrong, and that's that those residents have to move their car every 24 hours per the bylaw that applies to everybody on the street, and they wish to not have that bylaw apply to them.
So if I could just
Please,
follow up.
Councillor Turley.
So the motion we're asking for, and I don't see an address in the motion, I'd be far more comfortable to have this on a residential property basis as opposed to a blanket across the city. I know it's residential streets, but that doesn't mean it's at 451 Selby. I'm talking about individual properties. Where does it say that?
Councillor Armstrong?
I'd like to respond. It's not just Selby Street that's having this problem. I've heard from people on McClary, I've heard from other areas, because they don't have driveways and they don't have parking. So the motion would be for the different options for people on residential streets, because there's a lot of places that don't have it. So the report could come back, well, you've got a garage and you got a driveway, you wouldn't qualify. So that's what I'm looking for, is for options from staff as to what would work. Victoria's got one where they're allowed up to 72 hours, I believe. Then there's another, I think it's Richmond. You can park on your street with one car if you have a two-car household and you only have one garage. So I'm just looking for the options as to what can do to help these seniors. Like, I mean, in their thing, they're almost claiming it's age discrimination because, you know, we said because that they're seniors, they don't drive cars, which is inaccurate, and a lot of them have health issues. So that was the purpose, because, you know, 2 of them did get hurt trying to move their vehicles within the 72 hours because they didn't want to get, or 24 hours, they didn't want to get a ticket during the snow area.
So, okay, I'll talk to you about it later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Martman?
Thank you. That was what I was following up on, was it wasn't site-specific. But you're not saying for those in multiplexes or anything like this is wide open? Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gurry?
Is it, through you to Councillor Armstrong, Your Worship, is it possibly narrowed down to those in the downtown area that receive resident exempt parking passes? So there's more than just that one area. So no, it's, okay, thank you for that clarification.
That Uplands is having the exact same issue because we gave numerous parking variances. Metro Drive's the other one where they're parking in private property now and getting their vehicles towed because, again, we gave variances, so there's no place for them to park.
Any further discussion? Motion is to for staff prepare a report. All those in favor? Any contrary? Councillor Turley? Duly noted. Thank you. Motion carries. And the next is Councillor Armstrong, motion re city facilities room bookings for nonprofit addiction support groups. Councillor Armstrong.
That staff prepare a report for options to secure use of rooms at City of Nanaimo facilities to assist nonprofit addiction support group meetings, which are a critical part of the recovery program, and speak to that if seconded.
Please, seconded, Councillor Martman.
This came about because I was talking to people on the streets that belong to AA and NA, and some of them down by Wesley Street that are really struggling because they can't attend Zoom meetings, which is how most of them are going. Many of their places where they could have in-person meetings, they can't right now because of winter weather. So I was wondering if there was facilities that would be available that would fit the COVID protocols. And it's not asking for free, it's just asking what is available that would be appropriate. And perhaps even if there is just a mention of what, if they do need financing, this is only during the pandemic, I'd like to say that as well, that they could apply for, grants that would be available, such as the one we passed last week, and I think it was additional $36,000 to help out. So it's more just about what's available for them because they're struggling to find places. And I mean, we spend lots of money helping those that don't want to help themselves and very little on those that do want to help themselves and that are really struggling to get through this pandemic sober and not using drugs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kesselbrook.
Thank you, Worship. Just to speak to this, I've had members of the Alano Club, which basically leases out space, and then the different NA, CA, AA groups can use the space that they manage. They reached out and were saying that they are in a situation where before they were renting spaces for very low rates from churches or other nonprofits, and because of COVID, they've had to, they're not able to access those spaces, and now they have to rent out space from private owners at a much increased cost, and they're not able to cover those costs because donations are down. And it is a huge community, the recovery community. There's very many people that really rely on those support groups to make it through their healing and addiction process. And so I think that is important that we do find a way to support. And I guess my question to Councillor Bonner is that does your motion, Armstrong, does it, do we need to add in looking at potential grant or financial solutions that we could provide as well, or do you want to just solely to look at the city facilities?
I'm not more concerned about the city facilities. I'm actually meeting with the Adelano Group tomorrow with links of areas that they can apply for funding, such as our grants, as well as civil forfeiture grants that are available, and there's other grants available through the province as well as the federal government that they may be able to apply for. What I'm most concerned about is trying to find a spot right now, and then if there's something available from the city, then they can apply for different grants.
Should if there's a case where there is no city space available, but we do have some bridge funding that could help these groups out, that could be available more short term and immediate, because I know there's an immediate need. It might be worthwhile to sort of have those options available in the report if there is no space options at the city.
Let's try not to turn this into a back and forth between the two of you, but Councillor Armstrong.
No, I'm just wondering if that would be a separate motion. That's all. Like, my motion is just for space for them, because there are some groups, there's lots of groups that do have money, there's other groups that don't. So I think I see the financial as a totally separate motion. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I guess I'm a little confused on this one, and I haven't discussed it with my friend Councillor Armstrong. First of all, in terms of finance, which I think would have to be a totally separate conversation, there is funding available through the Grants Advisory Committee for organizations for facility rentals. But I'm struggling to understand the need for this motion, options to secure use of rooms at City Nanaimo facilities. Why can't they just phone Bevan Park or Bowen Park and say, what rooms have you got available? We need spaces.
Mr. Harding. Enlighten us, please.
Thank you, Worship. So yes, we've supported a number of AA groups and other agencies in their meetings. One of the issues is some of the outbuildings that are a little more flexible in the times and meetings that they want to do given the pandemic restrictions on number of people per room. Some of those facilities are too small now for them. So one of the issues is either the groups have to become smaller, or they need to go to larger facilities. And that is where there's a bit of a rub, because a lot of our larger facilities, again, are used up quite a bit. Everyone just keeps saying Bevan Park, but Bevan Park is a very busy location. So we are trying to accommodate some now, but it is definitely, some of our facilities are too small to meet the pandemic restrictions of how many people per room that in the past could take 40, now may only be able to take 10. So, I mean, that's probably not the exact equation, but it's very similar to those type of things.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Sorry, I guess I'm slow, or it's
late.
It's late for some of us. I still just don't quite understand the point of it, and I guess the other thing I would say is, although I totally support the concept and the work of nonprofit addiction support groups, there's probably other nonprofit groups that are also looking for community space and options for rooms, and subsequently the money to pay for those rooms. So to me, this is confining it to one small group, and I'm not sure that that's appropriate either. So I struggle with the necessity of this motion, but I'll listen to further comments and debate. Is Councillor Martman going to instruct me again?
We're going to go to Councillors Bonner, Turley, Armstrong, and then Martman. Oh, just Councillor Bonner, Turley, and Martman. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to support this. It's my understanding this came about because the groups that were doing this addiction support ran out of rooms because the rooms they were existing no longer were available to them because of COVID. And why it's a specific group, I think these are the people that need our help the most right now. They're the ones that, without this support, may very well be slipping back, and these are the people that could quite possibly be on the street if we don't help them out. And that's the way I was looking at this thing. Some of our facilities are not large enough for them, but many of them are. And they're certainly larger than the ones they've had in the past, where they have a meeting in church basements and various other places which are now no longer available to them. So that's why I think I thought the use of secure use of might include the possibility of special funding for them or to help out pay for their rent, but I'm willing to look at a separate motion for that if necessary.
Take it out of the menstruation budget.
I didn't know we had one.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking at this thing a little bit like Councillor Thorpe is, and, you know, it's a great concept, don't get me wrong, but A, we don't know for how many, and B, we don't know for how often or how frequently. And I would think that it would be helpful for staff if we had some idea of what the potential demand is going to be. I don't know if Councillor Armstrong can speak to that or not.
Councillor Armstrong, yes.
The thing is the maximum we can have right now is 50. That's the total maximum. My understanding, when I talked to some of the people when they called, they didn't know how many different rooms could hold. I don't know if there's been a study done that yet by the city, so that's one of the reasons for the motion. Then we would know. Beban, like room A, can take 10 people. The big room can take 40 people. Like, we don't have, it was my understanding, and speaking from them, when they phoned up, nobody could give them that information. So that was the purpose behind that, is that we will now have a document that will say, well, I was just at Bowen the other day, and that could take 20 in the one room, and I think it was 10 in the other room. So it would give them options. So that was the purpose behind it. The most anybody can hold is 50, right, by order. So that was the whole purpose, is that they were struggling to find places when they called. And I don't know how accurate the information is, because I didn't have a chance to speak to Mr. Harding about it, but they got different answers. Well, no, you can only have 2 in this room, 10 in that room. So this way, we would actually have an inventory of how many people can fit in different areas. And if they called up, when they show up, yeah, you can have 30 there, or no, sorry, you were given the wrong information, you can only have 20. That's what it's about.
And we don't know how often each group meets.
To me, that's irrelevant. It's just, what it is when they do call up, then they can find out that, yes, that this room is available. They pay for the use of the room, or they get funding for the use of the room. I mean, there's something like 30 or 40 different AA groups and NA groups, but they don't have the ability to find spacing right now.
Councillor Martman?
Yes, thank you. I just
Get to a vote, I would think.
Yeah, I just want to echo, Councillor Bonner said it quite succinctly. I understand that we have many not-for-profits who do tremendous work with many of our vulnerable population, but this is the most vulnerable population. I'll speak from experience, having a brother who is a dry alcoholic, having an ex-husband who is actually a cocaine addict. So these type of programs are what keeps people from getting on the streets. And I think we have to do everything we can to not have our homeless population increase. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Any contrary? Thank you, Mr. Harding. Sorry. Unless you wish to speak, just for the joy of hearing, a motion for adjournment would be appreciated. Councillor Brown, do I have a seconder, or do you wish to stay all night? Councillor Armstrong? All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much.